Under approval of Selectman budget message due October 1st, 2013. 8:20 PM, recap and discussion of Board of Selectmen goals and objectives session, determine schedule for discussion of and action on specific items. 8:40 PM, Collins Center update, vote on which town manager act or both acts to proceed under on search. Review and discuss revised work plan, review and discuss and approve revised professional services agreement with reduced costs of $1,500. 8:50 PM, Selectmen comment. 9:05 PM, Town Manager updates. 9:20 PM, topics not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance of the meeting. Approval of minutes. Next Board of Selectmen meeting, October 15th, 22nd, 29th, November 5th, 19th, December 3rd, and December 17th. 9:30 PM, public comment, and 9:35 adjournment. Discussion during board meetings should always be courteous and respectful and should be confined to the subject under consideration. Sarcasm is generally not respectful, and the subject under consideration does not include the individuals involved in the debate. The board approved the Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse policy that will be followed during meetings. During each topic, there will be no questions from the audience. Even if the public raises their hands, they will not be recognized during topic discussion. All statements and questions should be directed to the chairman during the public comment period, who will ask the appropriate persons to respond. Comments should be kept to 3 minutes or less. This is to try to keep the meeting schedule and not run behind. This meeting will be recorded as an official record. If you wish to record the meeting in any manner, you must advise the chair prior to the start of the meeting. A copy of documents must be provided as kept as part of the official record. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Okay, 7:05 PM, update and proposed revisions of intersection of Norman Todd Road and Beechwood Street by Toll Brothers following the Board of Selectmen Planning Board site visit.
What about Polly?
I'll do that right after this, yeah. So Friday morning at 9 AM, there was a site visit up to the new intersection layout on Beechwood Street and Norman Todd. At the upper end of those two streets meet in two locations. There's a lower end by Mealy's Pond and the upper end.
And just for clarification, no deliberations took place at that site visit. It was just there for observation.
Thank you. So two of the selectmen were able to make that meeting. There was a little bit of confusion on when it was happening, but I think John Mozulewski had a nice memo that summed up the issues. Maybe I should just read the memo. Memo to the Cohasset Planning Board from John Mozulewski regarding estates at Cohasset, site visit 9/27/13. Attended the meeting at the planning board's request that was called by Board of Selectmen to view work being performed at Beechwood Street and Norman Todd Road. There were various attendees, including the design engineer, John Carbonaro, board members, and local residents. At the time of the visit, all vertical granite curbing at the intersection was in place. A stop sign was in place. No paving or pavement striping was in place. John Carbonaro made a brief presentation of history of approval process and the traffic calming, quote-unquote, purpose of the design. Positive and negative comments were voiced by local residents. Major negative comments were: 1, the new throat of the intersection on Beechwood Street was too narrow. 2, sight distance on Norman Todd Road to the east was too short. 3, occasional church parking along the vertical granite curbing would restrict width of intersection to less than 2 lanes of traffic. After listening to comments and discussing possible modifications, the meeting was adjourned. The Board of Selectmen will address the issue at one of their subsequent board meetings. JFM observations were: 1, it's difficult to properly assess the intersection prior to the roadway striping for both Norman Todd Road and Beechwood Street being completed. And 2, further discussion of the matter would be more efficient if an as-built survey and plan of the roadway modifications to date was prepared. The as-built should compare existing construction with the approved plans. Site arrival 9 AM, left side at 10 AM, cloudy 65 degrees, end of memo. So, there were a bunch of neighbors there, and I see there's some in the audience. I think my recollection of the discussion when the Board of Selectmen, Mike, do we have the minutes from when that happened?
Do we have those, Tracy?
When was it, last week?
No, this has been a while ago when this came in front of the board for their approval,
I think it was September 2012, maybe,
was it?
or maybe October.
Got the plan, I don't have the minutes, but I'll pull them out.
Yeah.
September 2012?
I think probably around there.
This is the original one. You went on board. Oh, the original one?
Yeah.
Diane, do you have the exact date?
I'm just making that up. Just my recollection is it was around that time. It might have even been October.
Yeah, it was.
Late October.
It was a year ago.
Yep, about a year ago.
I don't think it was the summer, it might have been September, October.
Okay, so my recollection of that was, we looked at the plan, we discussed as it was presented, but I think what struck me when I went up there the first time to look at it after some citizens started calling in was the curbing that had gone in. I don't remember a big discussion about kind of hardening that intersection up.
No, never, I don't remember that at all. In fact, I went up there and I had difficulty taking a left turn out, and a car nearly hit me. Because it's a little bump there in the hill coming up from Normantor.
I went down there,
October 16th?
drove down today.
Yeah.
and, It did seem, I mean, I was in the Explorer, which is not a big SUV, but it's an SUV, and it just seemed that there's like a little, it's an odd angle when you come in, and I know that the neighbors down there, some of the residents have really experienced quite a bit of noise and disruption with all this construction, and I really don't want to say let's do it over again, but it did seem to be just a teeny bit of a little bottleneck just in that the one place where it kind of comes around. And then when I came out, I turned around, I came out, I had the same experience as Martha, except for I didn't almost get hit. But that you have to inch out in order to be able to see traffic coming up Beechwood from 3A. So if you're coming out and you want to take a left-hand turn, so I would, for that purpose, which is not what we're here tonight, I was thinking maybe reduce the speed limit or some signs or something there, because I know there are some line driveways up here that might help address also.
You know,
Yeah.
right now, my concern is that it's, I mean, every new road, design or change is gonna feel very different and awkward and maybe not proper to people that are used to traveling that road. And I think, one, it's not complete, and two, you know, I hate to question an engineer until you've got something that is, I mean, this has gone through planning board and their engineer and the engineer who constructed it, I would imagine, within certain guidelines. And, you know, I don't know whether it's worth discussing until at least it's completely finished. Because it, you know, like I said, every new construction is gonna feel awkward to somebody just driving down the road, and especially in this case, because it was very wide, and it's almost like when I worked at the Arts Center, you know, that curve, there's not a natural turn, it's just kind of a veering off. So to go from a road where you could just kind of veer in either direction onto a street to an actual straight line where you have to take a real, you know, 90-degree almost turn, it's gonna feel different, and I just don't feel like it's. I mean, we're involved in approving the plan because of the roadway, because of the right of way, but you know, I think absent any real problems in how this came to be or some functional engineering problem, I just don't know that there's a whole lot we should or could say about it at this point.
Well, if you wait till it's completed, it's harder to correct it than at this point, because if it's partway there, then everything isn't completely in place. That's the only thing that I think about. It seems to me there should be more of a curve there, and because it comes down too much. And I'm thinking of school buses, I'm also thinking of plowing snow. When you have snow piles on either side, it'll cut down the road even more. Those are concerns, that's all. Yeah.
And my concern was not at the entrance, because I share your viewpoint on that. Everything feels different when it's changed.
Sure.
It just seemed that once you got into it, there's a funny little twist or turn, and that's where there seemed to be some little narrowing at that point.
So I mean, there's kind of a policy question for the town going forward, on, so you've got 2 lanes there, each 12 feet wide. I guess my question is, I've noticed in a lot of cities and towns are putting bike lanes in, so the question is is that a policy that this town wants to look at going forward? When we're putting a lot of money into a certain intersection, do you make an accommodation for a bike lane, or is it just something that we're not gonna do? The other thing was, I wasn't aware, how much the attendance had increased at the Vedanta Center, but apparently they, on Sundays, were parking along that whole edge of Beechwood Street, which is kind of at a loss now because of the curb, they're not gonna be able to park there. So I don't know if the engineer was aware of that at the time, or I don't think it came up to the board, and just one of those things that came up once this went in, I think.
With respect to your bike lane policy question, I mean, I think that's something that, it's something I'd love to have a conversation about, but where does that, how does that take place? Where does that take place?
Yeah.
Is it something that would the genesis would be at planning board, or would it be us saying, can we start looking at this as we look to redevelop certain roads in town, or we have situations like that?
Well, I think it's a townwide conversation, where
Yep.
does the town wanna go? I'm
Yep.
not saying it's the board's decision, but,
Yep. No, I think that's a valid conversation to have going forward.
The fire and police, did they do dry runs
Oh,
and school buses?
I have not asked school buses, but I know that fire did, and they've got the big apparatus.
well, a couple of policemen, I happened to bump into them today, they expressed the concern about that road. They felt it was dangerous.
Have they expressed that to the chief, or?
I don't know. I just happened
Okay.
to meet them, and they brought up the subject. They said a lot of people will be coming tonight, that's all.
I do know that when this project was being designed, that the developer did meet with public safety, both police and fire, through the process, and that's part of their review process.
Part of the planning board process, all intersections are reviewed by the fire department to confirm that they're largest vehicles negotiated. Captras has a problem with an intersection design, we make a change, and I was involved in this decision because I was recused at the time, but I can't imagine that the planning board did not require that level of detail when they approved this intersection.
yeah, yeah.
Well, sometimes when something is built, it looks differently than the plans.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, it just comes out differently. And it's no fault of anybody, per se, because you just don't know. But I've had a lot of concerns from the people in the area, and I do think there is a risk there. As I say, I almost was hit on a car coming up Norman Todd Road, going out, so, and if it was dark or raining or something, it might be a problem, and I would think if we could cut back a little bit on each of those and just make it a little wider, I think you might solve that problem.
Mike and I had breakfast this morning, we were talking about this, and Mike suggested in the future, maybe it would make sense to lay out with spray paint in advance before the shovel goes in the ground, so that people could kind of get a feel of
That's a very good idea.
stuff, so, I think the issue is when you're hardening an intersection to the level that this has been hardened, it makes it difficult to
Correct it.
correct it at this point, so. And I kind of have a feeling that there could be some, I don't know, after a year, another issue may come up with it, but, so it may need to be revisited. I don't think we necessarily have all the answers right now to say, hey, this should move 2 feet that way or whatever, so
Toll Brothers is doing this, right?
yeah.
So if in a year we have some issues, the town gets to pay for it.
Well, I think we're at the state now where the selectmen had approved that the town's gonna pay for it,
Right,
no
anyway,
matter what,
regardless,
yeah.
well,
Yeah.
Have we had an issue like this in the past where there's been a road and it's been redesigned and there's been significant concern and we've had to revisit? I mean, it's,
I don't recall one like that, no.
you know, I would
I
imagine,
mean, my question is this, Beechwood Street's one of the oldest roads in town from the First Division. It was put in, and is this what we're gonna end up doing eventually, is putting curb everywhere in town? I guess is my question. Is that the new standard, or is it only on intersections, or what's the policy? I'm
I'm
not clear.
partial to the old ones that had the grass along them. They look nicer and you don't need to have.
Well,
them
I know in
drainage.
downtown on Elm Street, we had a big issue about what type of curb would go in. We decided that it needed to be kind of a rolling curb that cars could kind of pull up and go a little bit onto the sidewalk. And this, in a sense, is similar to a downtown area with the church parking on Sunday. But besides that, it's just a regular street. It happens to be one of the oldest ones in town, but anybody have any ideas on, Mike?
Sure, and if I could address a couple items, Mr. Chairman. As many of you know, part of my background is in designing, permitting, and developing, tens of millions of dollars of infrastructure projects. First, this was voted by the Board of Selectmen on 11/1/13, and in the minutes, it doesn't really specify discussions of hardening of the intersection, so that wasn't really called out as part of the discussion that probably took place in the planning board. Going through my list of items, one of the residents that was at the site was concerned about the site distance off to the left side as you're heading on to Norman Todd off of Beechwood. And when we were out doing the site visit, our tree warden was out, Andy, and he now has this on his list to remove that dying tree, which will open up some site visit to the left. So that's going to take place.
We talked to the landowner?
It's on public property.
It is.
He is going to notify the abutters, but it is on the right of way. So he's going to do that. I heard the mention of speed. That is something we can ask the police department to look at for the actual posted limit on that road. Now, there are design requirements that the road has to be posted based upon what the road design is. But it may be that the speed of that road is actually going faster than what it's designed for, and that can certainly be done with enforcement and try to signage and enforcement to correct that. As it relates to bike paths, later on this month, as I had mentioned, we want to have a joint meeting with the planning board and talk about the Route 3A corridor project. And that in there has, some talk about a bike paths around town. That may be the appropriate venue to really talk about the future as to what the town does with a bike paths for any improvements in the right-of-way. Now, granted, we have some old roads that don't have the appropriate width to put in a bike path, and you also have to be careful that if you start to modify an existing road, then you have to put in the appropriate drainage that meets today's stormwater requirements, which includes all water separators, and all of a sudden your road costs can triple just by putting in the appropriate drainage, just to add in 3 more feet of a lane width, just to add a bike path. But again, it is possible. I just want you to be aware of that. Mr. Chairman of the Planning Board, as the chairman mentioned, we had looked at the possibility of whenever there's a realignment of a public intersection, before that comes to your public hearing, could you in the future modify your regulations so that a week prior to the public hearing, they have to kind of like spray dot out on the road what the proposed intersection would look like?
Well, we're currently reviewing and updating our subdivision rules and regulations, which is where this would probably come in more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we could include that in that if it's a good idea. And we also might want to include that on our commercial subdivision rules and regulations also.
That'd be ideal. I mean, there's been talk of maybe doing stakes, but you really can't stake a roadway.
Road.
But I think the dots on the road would at least have people understand what they're looking at.
I think that could be worked in.
Okay. I've heard the word, well, it seems to be this and it seems to be that. And while I understand and accept, and even when I went there, it seemed to be a little bit narrower than I thought it was going to be. But we did have our town director of planning and permitting, engineering, go out there and actually did a site measurement, and it is designed, the as-built, the design is actually as the plan, so it is as what was approved by the planning board and the town. But I want to get into the seams piece, is that when the Board of Selectmen adopts or modifies a public right-of-way, you technically have liability for that. And if the modifications aren't based upon an engineering plan that meets all of the site requirements and the speed requirements and the radius requirements, and there's an accident that happens there, the town could be in future liability because it knowingly did not design the road based upon a stamped engineering plan. So I caution the board on the issue of seams versus what is actually stamped by a registered professional. And I agree that it seems it's a little tight, but it was stamped. So, we're kind of stuck there from a liability standpoint. From the DPW position, this intersection required for snow plowing and maintenance multiple swipes to actually clean it out because it's so wide. This is better for them from a road maintenance standpoint, and it does funnel the drainage back into the development with the curbing that's there. The other thing that the board does have some authority to do is looking at where to put parking signs and no parking signs. Technically, the whole area is non-parking. However, it's being used, certainly in the weekends. As I recall with the planning board, when this was done, it was to remove those 3 cars that were parking on both sides in the intersection so that they couldn't park there as part of the design, but to make sure there was enough space after that for additional parking. If the project, if the church is expanding, I don't know how to solve that. But from the planning board standpoint, they were looking at public and vehicular safety at the time. And that was, I think, their primary focus. So, thank you.
And where are the no parking signs?
Well, they're not there, and the question is, that I have for you, and we can have the police take a look at this too, is do we want to go down and mark, and I think this was a discussion that was there, at least those right in the intersection. We don't want cars parking there because it's only a 12-foot width. So basically, the length of 3 cars, and then it opens up. The curbing stops, if you look at your plan right here, the curbing more or less stops, I believe, right where it says proposed intersection improvements, right around the P. Because we had a few cars parking. We had the big National Grid truck there, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
When we were there. So if you look at that, there's like 3 lengths of cars that can park right in the intersection. We probably want to promote that as no parking, just so from a safety standpoint. But then, allow parking on Sundays, in those other areas. If that helps try to balance the needs of the church with the neighborhood and the public safety. You don't have to make that decision tonight,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it'd be
My-
worth taking a look at.
My only concern is, you know, up on Clay Spring Road, some of the neighbors, when it's allowed, parking on the street, but if my neighbor across the street is parked in the street, and I need to move one of the vehicles down onto the street, I generally put it on the lawn, because it's, with somebody parked on the street, it's down to one lane. And if I park out on the street too, then nobody's gonna get by. So I would have some concern about that, for the neighbors, for the residents.
We don't have to do that study, it was just a
Yeah, no,
suggestion, if
I'm
you wanna do a
just-
parking study.
Yeah, well,
We can,
So I'm looking at the plan, and I know what the as-built up there, and I'm seeing a discrepancy on the curbing. This is showing curbing the entire length from Beechwood Street up into Walnut Hill Lane, I believe, and on the other side, stopping just across from the lane, but the way it was built, it is, it's got a big gap in the middle, which I'm in favor of, but, somebody made a statement Friday that the as-built had been confirmed to be what was built with the plan. So I'm not seeing where the break in the curb is defined on the plan.
I don't have the large set of plans, but we can certainly look into that and give you an update at the next meeting.
Okay, so which set would have come in front of the selectmen?
This was the plan that I was provided.
Well, here's what I'm thinking. I don't know about the rest of the board, but I think the town's gonna have a responsibility if there's problems that come up to fix it, and I think it's gonna take a little bit of time to figure out exactly what the issues are. I don't pretend to know exactly what they are right now, so I would be inclined to at least let them finish and get through the winter and revisit this in the spring and see if something has come up. If we need more time, take it to the fall, but then, definitely revisit this in 6 to 12 months to see what the issues are.
Why don't I, after it's been completed, why don't we come back with an update in 6 months?
What's the timeframe? What's the timeframe on completion?
I don't know the answer to that. We're close. I mean, the
I think
plant's
it's
closed
soon.
November 15th, so it has to be repaid before then.
It was in
I'm not sure when
December.
they plan on putting the second course on there. They may be holding off on that till their project has moved along further.
Okay, and then the second question is, I understand what you're asking, Mr. Chairman, with regard to the curbing, because if I'm reading the plans right, it shows the curbing coming down from Walnut Hill Lane all the way through
Yeah,
Beechwood Street,
right,
right?
yep.
And you're saying that that's not there. I haven't
Right.
been to the site, so
Yeah,
I'm asking.
yeah.
Likewise, there's a continuing question on what sounds to be Sunday parking. Should that wait? In other words, should we ask, I mean, who is the appropriate authority here, to ask the police department to take a look at that area and find out, to what extent back from the intersection, no parking signs should go up?
Well, I think there can't be any parking along the curb. That's the issue. There used to be plenty of room for a whole row of cars, the whole length, without
To throw a
interfering
wheel
with the
up on the,
intersection.
yeah, right, gotcha.
So, that's gonna change now, and, maybe by the spring, we'll know all the apparent issues, that we can address it then. Anybody wanna speak from the audience? Come on up.
Real briefly, I think if
I'd
there's
like
a
to speak
possibility that we're going to be asking Toll Brothers to do something different or some new work, it
No.
wouldn't be a good idea to wait till they're finished. They'd be much more interested in helping us out with changes now, while the project is still ongoing in that part
Okay,
of the area.
so I was under the impression that this is approved by the board and that's what they're building, end of story.
Correct, but if you guys want something different and wanna do a handshake deal and, hey, can you help us out? They'd be much, I would think, and I don't work with
Yeah,
Toll Brothers,
yeah.
I'm not here to defend them or to endorse them, is that they'd be more inclined to do that and work with you now, while they haven't finished that portion of the project, rather than wait until that portion of the project is finished, and I can understand the legitimate reasons for doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
You're probably gonna get more resistance from them. Second point, I'd just like you all to think about, and this is counterintuitive, and I learned it after 9 years on the planning board, and it doesn't make any sense to you think about it, but wide streets are not necessarily a good thing. Narrow streets tend to make people slow down and
Yeah,
be more
I know
careful.
that. Mr.
I
Chairman.
Yeah.
think that was the intent
Right.
when they designed this road.
Uh,
Well, the fundamental intent was to take away the 45-degree intersection
Yeah.
between those two roads.
Mhm.
So we've squared that off, so the primary safety feature has been achieved by the current plan.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the macadam plants stay open till the 15th of December, so there isn't a rush for that. And I know about narrow streets, but I'm concerned of the curve, and the tree coming down might help.
I got one, thanks.
But I'm concerned it won't be too narrow, that we can't have the snow piles and the, because that cuts down the width of the street. If you think it's all right with snow piles, then it's okay, but I'm really concerned in the wintertime.
I think granite curbing like that is pluses and minuses.
Yeah,
You know, it defines the intersection better,
yeah,
helps keep people
that's true.
on the street better if they misnavigate a turn onto that
Mhm,
street.
mhm.
Doesn't help you getting off,
Mm.
but nothing's gonna help.
Yeah, well, it's just the visibility going out that I was concerned. Maybe if you have a stop and enter sign there, it might help, too.
Just this sign coming up the hill there saying, you know, there's an intersection
Mm.
coming up that.
Well, both signs, one coming out that says stop it before you enter, too. Then you could see better, and coming up the street saying blind road or something, you know.
To be honest with you, as streets go in this town on these old roads, those sightlines are pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think your suggestion, Mr. Chairman, is reasonable and probably prudent, unless we have something specific to talk to Toll Brothers about now while they're working on it.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that comes to mind would be what are the curb options on that right side of angling a curb that would make it possible to at least solve the parking issue on Sundays, but, I grew up in this neighborhood, and I know the cars used to fly up Norman Todd Road, and I'm pretty sure they still do, so it's always been kind of a speedway there, so my gut reaction when I first saw this was, it struck me as kind of the Eisenhower on-ramps where you used to pull up and stop and then gun it to get in to the traffic, where I would rather be more at an angle to speed into something, so I guess, I don't know, I guess the curve radius is okay there, but it seems like I guess the worry is you get rear-ended coming out of there if somebody's flying up Norman Todd. Yes, ma'am.
I live at 26 Locust Road, and I have to travel that road every day to go to work. And as it is now, I know it's not done, but when I come up to the end of Beechwood to take the right onto Beechwood to go up to 3A, and I pull out, I'm almost practically in the oncoming traffic. It's that big that big bulge that comes out that restricts you. And then when you take that right, you're practically out on the oncoming, coming down.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've been in that house for 46 years. And I just think that this, with the snow accumulating and all of that, and it's just an accident waiting to happen. Two cars trying to get by in the
Yeah.
snow and the ice and the.
So you're concerned also with pulling into the other head-on traffic, kind of,
Right.
because, yeah,
When I come up Beechwood Street,
yeah,
and I come up to that corner, now where they have that big bulge,
yeah,
when I come out to take the right onto Beechwood to go out to 3A, when I pull out, I'm practically on the other side of the road, on the oncoming traffic coming down Beechwood to go to Norman Todd Road.
yeah.
It makes you pull, it doesn't give you enough room to actually make that corner turn.
So it's like the throat is too tight. If it was a little bit more open, you'd be at a better angle to
Yeah, it
get
just
into the
seems that
traffic, yeah.
bulge comes out so far, it just doesn't give you a safe right turn onto Beechwood to go out to 3A. Because it puts you closer to the oncoming traffic coming down Beechwood Street. And I travel at 7 days a week, I'm up and down that road, to the dump, to work. And I do have to say, on the weekends, the church parking, they used to park that whole length from the entrance of where they're building those units, all the way to the end, right up to the stop sign. And that was all, and that even narrowed the road down, but it was okay because it was wide enough that you could get by, but it just seems that bulge, that big bulge that comes out is restricting. It forces you to go further out into the road to make the turn, which I think is kinda dangerous.
That's what I experienced today, Mr. Chair. I was turning the opposite way, but I felt that I was out in the oncoming traffic in order to be able to see enough to safely pull out. So if somebody had been flying up Norman Todd, I would have had to go in reverse real quick.
I just didn't know why it had to come out so far into the roadway, that curve. There certainly seems to be plenty of land there, you wouldn't have had to come out that far for a sidewalk.
Glenn?
Do.
Those are questions I can't answer.
I know, we're not engineers.
The thing that you might wanna do is have somebody like Brian, Joyce go over, talk to Tony Casapolo, the project manager with Toll Brothers, say, look, we got an issue with this, which he knows, cause you had the meeting. Can you see what else might fit inside the Mass Highway guidelines that could, solve some of the concerns? And at least they wanna notice that, you gotta get something done, so that we're not, cause they're gonna be here a long time, that project.
Yeah.
A long way, so I think now is the time where they'd be more agreeable to looking at other alternatives. And then maybe let them come up with something.
Rich?
Better define the problems first.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Rich Fitzpatrick, 2 Hammond Ave. So to add on to what my neighbor said about the bulge, which I think is a great adjective for this, one of the problems that I've had is to be sitting at the stop sign, ready to take a right onto Norman Todd towards 3A, and cars coming down Beechwood, taking a left and cutting the corner there, because it's essentially an S turn. You're asking people to take a left, and then they go along, and then they go back down. So you're coming down the hill. So it seems like the intersection is wide open, but it's really not. And when you have 2 cars at that intersection, it can get kind of hairy. Whereas if it was a little bit more of a merge, it would really simplify things. When I went to all the planning board meetings, and all the neighbors totally supported this effort, the idea behind this. We thought it was a great idea. But you look at the map, and it's hard to translate that into reality. And in talking with the people who designed it, I understand that it meets the standards, but the topography here is unusual with the strange way Todd and Beechwood come together, and the hill and everything else. So this isn't the only design that could possibly work. I think that there are certainly other possibilities that would still be within the guidelines, but be a safer alternative.
Rich, do you know if they've, my understanding was that the stop sign where it was on Friday was gonna be up much further.
Right.
Do you know, has that been moved and then?
I
is
didn't
that-
notice.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I think it's
It's gonna
supposed to
go
be right at the-
forward about 6 or 7
so that's
feet.
right at the corner.
Right.
My,
That's where the stop sign is kind of, I don't think is really an issue, because you have to get out as far as you can, because the people come up Norman Todd so fast that you have to be ready to go. And, you know, as my neighbor said, you know, one problem is people pulling out, you know, too far, taking too wide of a turn. But last week I almost got rear-ended as somebody came up behind me. Who, you know, they were you know, I'm sure they were speeding, going 45 or 50, but you just don't have that much time.
You think it's the rear ending potential is more just people aren't used to it, so they're flying because they don't know. I'm not trying
Yeah.
to diminish it. I'm just
Right.
saying.
I don't know how, you know, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that that's gonna change their behavior, you know, for the previous half mile.
Right. I mean, my issue right now is that I don't feel equipped to be having engineering discussions.
Right,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And then that's why there is the hearing process, and then there is the practical reality of how things actually function once they're done. And you know, maybe we just need to pay attention to. I mean, most of the work has been done. I mean, I think it's near complete. You know, it's just the pavement right up to the curbs that is left.
Well, I think that Stuart's point was if we do have some ideas right now, now's the time to bring it up.
But I don't think we're the ones that have the ideas.
Right, but we should at least be able to, like, enunciate the issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, here's what I've heard so far.
Yeah,
Westbound turns onto Beechwood Street from, well, onto Norman Todd from Beechwood Street,
Yeah.
or the continuation of Beechwood Street. Westbound turns, at this point, seem sharp enough to potentially place a car crossing over the median,
yeah.
okay? Number two, a contributing factor is speed on Norman Todd, which no design is really gonna help, short
Right.
of a slingshot. Eastbound turning automobiles from Beechwood, or the continuation of Beechwood from Norman Todd onto Beechwood, can potentially cut the corner. You know, I hate to say this, but it seems to me that we must teach that in driver's ed here in Massachusetts. And by the way, Rich, that's not to belittle the concern
No, I understand.
whatsoever.
No, I almost got hit at 3A in Beechwood, somebody cutting across 3A to do that.
3A and Pond Street is, I mean, we should sell tickets for it, really. And concern exists on flow and visibility during periods of high expected parking. Okay, I mean, that sounds to me to pick it up,
Yeah,
right? All of which leads back to what Glenn was suggesting and what Chair of Planning was suggesting, is this is probably the time to enunciate those concerns with the folks that are actually doing the work.
Yeah.
Is there another way to make this design, adapt this design, so that it cuts down to the extent that it can on those things that this intersection can address? This intersection can't address speed on Norman Todd Road, okay? That has to be us, it has to be enforcement. You know, I mean, we see it, I living on Pond Street, I see it on a regular basis. But so do folks that live along Sawyer Street,
I
et
live in a
cetera.
cul-de-sac and people go 40 miles. I'm not kidding you. It's awful.
But we can address questions with regard to engineering, any changes in engineering on westbound turning radius, eastbound, you know, it does eastbound traffic flow, and then, of course, parking. Does that, I mean, did I sum it up, or is there something else in there that I've missed?
Seems to me that,
well, the only other complexity in here was that the people that live west of this intersection, like that the Beechwood Street traffic is being forced to slow down more. So, but I thought that if
I
the
can
further
understand
that is down Norman Todd the wrong way, the faster they can get going once they get going. So it did make sense to me that the further this was up this way, the slower they would be going by that house. So in other words, this is moved back so that actually,
Right, right.
all the speeding cars are gonna continue to speed, and the Beechwood Street would have a little bit more of a head start on gaining speed, the way this is designed now, had this stayed more like, not stayed the way it was, so.
Which, yeah, which was more
So,
like a
I don't
slingshot
know.
lane.
I think, maybe we should just check with the developer, see what the possibilities are on making changes now.
So let me suggest this, Mr. Chairman, with the board's permission. We'll authorize Brian Joyce to meet with the developer
Yep,
and approach them to see, A, are they willing to relook at the design of the intersection?
yep,
B, if they are, what would the proposed alternative be? There would have to be a stamped engineering plan from a safety
Yeah.
liability standpoint. And C, and this is where I need the board's permission, that if the developer is willing to do that, that you guys would fast-track an approval of that, because with the construction, the asphalt plant's
Yeah.
closing down, if they do agree to do that, they're not going to have a long delayed process.
right.
They're going to want to move that forward relatively quickly. And I think that would be okay with the planning board, because the planning board, because this is a public roadway, they don't necessarily have to approve a public roadway realignment. They just had to make sure that the Board of Selectmen would approve some plan, which they've already done.
Said another way, we wanted to make sure that something was put forward to you that, was better than schmuck.
Yeah.
That you had something good that came to you that we thought would be safe and effective.
So we can at least ask the question.
Yeah, yeah,
And he has the authority to go forward and kind of negotiate a design that's stamped,
yeah.
and that you're willing to fast-track it. If they say no,
Yeah.
then we go to your plan A, is we wait 6 months and see what happens.
Yeah.
The second thing that I would like to do is to also have a speed study done on Norman Todd Road, given the concerns that Rich has mentioned, that he's got cars going 45, 50 miles an hour, and to make sure that that road is posted accordingly and enforced appropriately.
What does that mean? A traffic study or a
A traffic
speed
study, it's something that the traffic division and the police department will do, is to go out and look at that roadway. We can actually potentially go get some traffic counters out there and do some measurement of the average speed of the roadway.
They'll take some data.
Yeah, and then they'll make some recommendations.
It's amazing because, people get stopped at the trains too. They're going slow and then 100 feet later, they're at 40.
Michael?
Okay,
Excuse-
hold on just one second. Did you want to say something?
Hi, my name is Jane Norton, with 49 Wilmington Road, I'm in the corner there, and my main concern in coming tonight was that I heard about the possible trimming back of the trees and shrubs.
Why don't you come up here, Jane, and we'll just talk about it. That tree, Mike is saying is in the public way, although
How
you
far-
probably think of it as your yard, because it's right, when you stand in front of the house, it's that kind of tree that is right on the edge. It's a big clump of a tree
Yeah,
on the edge of the sight line there.
Overgrown with ivy, I think.
with ivy and
Yeah.
poison ivy, yeah.
Yeah.
Let them touch it.
So I guess the question is,
Exactly. I
do you
mean,
have
it's
an
okay.
issue if the town pays to take that down, or?
No, I just wanted to be sure that there's not too much that will be taken away. I mean, we've
Yeah.
actually, bless you, had,
Thank you.
Cars, it's afforded some protection to have those trees there.
Yeah.
Literally where
I
a truck
think
went into the ravine and didn't come further because
Yeah.
they were there.
I think, Mike, we need to be really clear where the property line is, and that anything that is beyond that would absolutely need the permission of the homeowner.
Yes.
But,
Just a
yeah,
little
yeah.
clarification, because that was a surprise to me, and that's
Yeah.
why I came tonight. Right,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Michael, could that speed study also study the cars coming from 3A up Beechwood?
both ways?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Yeah, of course, yes.
It's just when I was trying to come out, I found that I was coming way out, but Beechwood has a little rise in it right there.
Yep.
So you really have to come out, and if somebody were flying along, you're already out on the road.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem there.
Okay, so,
We got 2 action items.
yeah,
And if action item A fails, we have action item A2, which is wait 6 months and see what happens.
Well, in the wait 6 months, I think we should be monitoring. If for whatever reason it doesn't happen and the road continues, we just need to kind of watch and see what the practical reality becomes, especially if we have a lot of snow this winter.
Would you,
Which tomorrow's gonna be 80, so I'm predicting not much snow this winter.
I'll quote you on that.
Farmer's Almanac.
I'm gonna go buy a snowblower, we're guaranteed for that.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions, we're gonna move on to the next item.
Can I,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just clarification, action item A, would you please, define it?
Yes, action item A is for Brian Joyce, our Director of Project Management and Planning, to approach Toll Brothers to see if they would be willing to relook at the intersection. If they are, to look at different engineering analysis to the intersections that would have a stamp plan because of the liability issues.
Right.
If they agree to do something at their own free will, then the board has agreed to fast track an approval so that they can meet the plant closings, the asphalt plants closing down by the middle of November.
No, it's actually the middle of December.
It's November. They,
Yeah,
yeah,
unless
the
it
winter
change-
mix is later, and that's 4 times
Well,
the
'cause-
cost.
Well, I know, but but I know they're still open in December, because they do it.
Specialized stuff, yes.
Yeah.
And then the second item is to go forward with asking the police department to do a speed study analysis on both ways of Norman Todd Road at the intersection of Beechwood.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, next item, Glenn Pratt.
Good evening. I'm here to talk about a land transfer to the Selectman Swim Trust. It's on the agenda as a senior center item, but it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, That's what, it was confusing to
mistake.
me.
Right.
I-
The history is that in the early '70s, a group of citizens got together with the idea to raise money to build a pool facility that could be used by the town. And Diana Kotcher, who's been one of the trustees at Swim Trust since the beginning, is here tonight. She's still on the board. So as they developed their plans, they went to town meeting to get a piece of land fronting on North Main Street so that their lot that they were creating would be a buildable lot under the zoning of the day. Town meeting voted to transfer them the land, and 40 years later, we discovered it never got done.
Oh, dear.
So now, of course, the 20-foot frontage doesn't work because the current zoning is 50. So we went to town meeting in 2012, telling the exact same story I just did, asking for authorization for you to transfer that 10,000 square foot piece of land to the Cohasset Swimming and Recreation Trust, a nonprofit, which makes their lot conforming under current zoning. So we have a deed here tonight that we'd like to get executed to do that. Another thing that's happened over the years is that as the Little League facility has expanded and they put the new ball fields in, they've made a wider, more usable parking lot. So a lot of the members of the swim center in the summer will come in there, they'll park there. A lot of them will come in to drop their kids off through there. So we asked the town meeting if you could give the swim trust an easement so they could pass over that legally. The other thing that happened, which was good for the trust, is that they were able to work out a deal with the water department to participate in using the abandoned Sawyer Street wells much the same way that the Little League does, and they could use some of that water for makeup water in their pools, which saves them a lot of money. And the water commission is on board with that. So they'll be needing to put a pipe under that Little League parking lot so they can tie in at the Little League building. So there's a lot of reasons that we thought it was good for them to have an easement across the Little League parking lot. Town meeting voted to authorize you to do that, and we have that easement here tonight too, which would like to sign. That's the story.
Very good.
All right.
Okay, questions?
This was voted at town meeting.
This was
We-
voted in
Yep.
We're just completing the action of town meeting?
Right. This is the second time town meeting.
Second time, second time.
Can't we push this off to like
So we-
2015, just to keep consistent?
No, poor Diana was 2 when this first came up.
Oh, you guys.
So there are two, town council always likes to get two of her signed, so if I can pass this around, we'll.
So I
Think it
move
goes to
that
Fred
Well, we
first.
have some of that
Okay,
in.
so this
We have
just-
these
yeah.
here too, but these
Well,
are,
we have
these are copies, okay.
for us, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we need a motion, right?
So do you want to take them separately?
Yeah,
Yes.
So I move the easement.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0.
And then I move the transfer of the land. on
Second?
North Main Street.
Is it transfer? Is no,
Is it a
yeah,
transfer?
Yes, it is a transfer.
Transfer.
It is a transfer.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0. Okay. Thank you, Glenn, for your persistence.
Thanks, Diana.
Thank you.
Well, it's Diana's been waiting for it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you, Diane.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, look, I have to tell you, I was more shocked than anybody when I found out it had never gone through. So this helps us a great deal.
There's 2 copies of each, if you can do both copies, Steve.
Okey dokey.
It's one signature per group, right? So it's two
No, we gotta
signatures?
do- see.
Oh, okay, you got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Got it.
Front page.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Glenn.
Was there one, I think, Steve, you might have missed one.
I
We'll get it back to you, all right?
yes, it is, I think it was the,
I missed them both before, so. Okay,
This is Stevens.
once those are signed, we're gonna start with the review and discussion of the FY15 budget.
Mr. Chairman, about 3 weeks ago, when this came up, we talked about the budget message, which encompasses most of this discussion, and I had
Yep.
volunteered at that point to draft an example of
yep.
one, which I've done. I realize that none of you have seen it. That's because it's generally hot off the presses
Yeah.
from this afternoon. But actually, I tried to encompass the bulk of our discussions from
Thank you.
from last Thursday night and some of the prior stuff, as well as incorporating the adopted
Oh, good.
fiscal policies of the town. So, and again, as I said, I realize everybody is just looking at this for the first time. It's not intended to be anything other than form, and as I said, encompassing the general principles of those things that we've discussed up to this point. So it's a starting point, if you will.
Thank you.
Sure.
Seems to be quite a comprehensive one, Steve. Thank you for your effort.
Oh.
This.
No, the effort goes into the typing, which I'm not a very, very good at.
Yeah, I know. This is incorporating some of our discussion last Thursday.
From Thursday, from prior elements, and also, as I said, Martha, it incorporates the adopted fiscal policies of town meeting back in 2012.
Do you wanna,
Read it?
Yeah, why don't we'll take a few minutes, just review it, and then we'll go into discussion.
Yeah.
Mike, I made a copy for you as well.
This is a sample of a draft budget message. I have one, Peter, for you if you'd like it.
financial management policy?
We have this.
Yeah.
Good.
Steve, could you define maximum available tax levy?
Basic,
Sorry for interrupting, but could I just, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
One of the items here
Oh,
is HR.
yes,
and
yes,
I
yeah.
asked Brian Magner to come to kind of give us an overview.
Hi,
of the
Brian, how you
HR.
doing?
How you doing?
Good.
If I could pull that
Yeah.
out, just so he
Yeah.
can do that, and then we get into the
Sure,
finances.
yep.
So I see that's number 4 in here.
Number 4, yeah.
yeah.
So,
Karen,
That's
remind
fine.
me of the question when we come back to this, okay?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
asking a lot.
It's a lot.
I think I remember.
So my goal is to get Brian out, but Brian Magner, he's our labor counsel and has been doing a phenomenal job for the town for many years. What I asked him to do as a project in early summer was to go through and analyze, almost as an audit, our existing HR structure. Now, you're going to hear what that is, and it's something that's not going to surprise you. But with that audit, he's going to talk about that, and he's going to talk about next steps, what needs to be done. You know, as I mentioned last week, from my perspective as town manager, this is our top priority that we need to include in the FY15 budget process. So with that, Brian, if you want to take it over.
Sure, and just as a introductory statement, we're not quite complete with this, but it is a work in progress, but I was down here, so it was a convenient time to sort of talk to you about, what we've been doing. The first step is to make sure that all of the posting requirements in town are being met. So went through, and we have a list here in this packet that I intend to give to Mike when it's complete, or, whoever may be in charge of the HR functions. And this has all the posting requirements in it. These need to be posted in a conspicuous place. They are posted here at Town Hall. I went over these with Jen Oram earlier. And we're not sure whether or not they're being posted properly in other work facilities throughout the town. That's something we're going to investigate. And if they're not being posted properly, they will be.
And these are just,
These are all of the postings that you're probably familiar with in your own workplace. Typically, they're posted in the kitchen type area. They're
and they send you these, like, if you don't have these posted, penalties.
Correct.
Like OSHA or and stuff
Yeah,
like that,
OSHA.
yeah.
yes,
OSHA.
yes. Now, interestingly, some of them are mass specific. Some of them are federal
Yeah.
specific. Some of them don't apply to you in mass. Some specifically do apply to you in mass. There's overtime laws. There's Family Medical Leave Act laws, Fair Labor Standards Act laws. So there's a whole host of them that need to be posted. Meal breaks, minimum wage, comp time, things like that. So we've gone over them. Like I say, all of them are up to date here in the town hall facility. The question is, at your fire, DPW, police, council on aging, library, we want to make sure that those are
And-
posted everywhere.
And they have to be posted in every building?
So that's a question that's not 100% clear, but I think to err on the side of caution, we wouldn't want an employee to say, well, I never go to town hall. I haven't been in town hall, for 2 years. Why would I know, that these are posted?
And do they physically have to be a piece of paper posting? So you can't go online and.
So I think given employees different access to online, and given if you're a DPW employee versus, some employee who has a desk job with a computer might have more access to online during the workday, I would recommend that they be physically posted. And then as an addition to that, to augment that, I do think that these should be part of a website. And I actually when I was talking to Jen earlier, she had mentioned that there is a new town website. Is that correct?
It's in the
not-
works, I think.
It's in the works,
Yeah.
right,
I
right.
think it's a theoretical.
So
yeah.
what many places have is they have, you can create a separate area for employees, and employees can access that, and it has all of these right online. Any FMLA policy, MMLA policy.
I'm sorry, and I don't mean to be rude, but I was unprepared for a meeting tonight that would be discussing the what I would term like the practical implementation of our HR or proposed or HR program. And I'm just wondering if that comes under the scope of our agenda item.
I wouldn't look at it as we're here to make decisions tonight. This is just an update as it relates to the HR issue. By no means are we asking you to take a vote on anything tonight.
Oh, no, and I'm sorry, Michael, I don't mean to imply that. I'm just saying that it seems to me this is a much broader and more in-depth discussion that we should be having, and more agenda time might be needed to explore it fully, to fully appreciate all the work and time and effort that's been put into it.
Karen, I agree. He's got a couple more weeks of work to do. And I look at it, this meeting is, this is a 60,000-foot view. We do need to schedule another good hour, if not longer, with the Board of Selectmen in a couple weeks to have Brian come back, because he said it's still a work in progress, and then to come back with a full-blown proposal. But if we could just keep this at the 20,000-foot level.
I guess where I'm getting kind of lost, and please excuse me,
Nope, no
Brian,
problem at all.
I apologize here, is that I'm looking at it tonight as how does HR, how does the discussion of HR relate to our budget? And what I'm hearing so far is, do we have all the postings met in all the areas? And again, excuse me,
Sure.
Brian.
No problem, and sorry for getting into the details. Lawyers like to do that. Unfortunately, we're fascinated by our own field of study. So, right, and so let me just back up, not get down into the weeds on any one particular issue. We have looked at a lot of the policies and
Thank you,
gone
Mr.
through
Chair.
there. And, as is maybe not surprising, if there hasn't been a dedicated person solely to HR, things fall through the cracks. Some of the policies are dated, need to be updated. Some of them have completely gone by the boards and maybe need to be purged out of existence. And, so we've gone and done that, and in the process of doing that with sort of sexual harassment policy, discrimination policy, Americans with Disabilities Act policy, Family Medical Leave Act policies, and so forth. So that's sort of where we're at. We're a good ways through it, but still have a little bit more to do. So if there are any questions on other things on the HR front,
Well, I would have a question. There have been some discussion, and I'm new to this because
Sure.
this is the first budget process I've been through in a couple of years. There've been some discussion about whether this would be, an employee or something, a consultant, or regionalization. And if we're planning the budget, we want to put something in the budget. Are there any recommendations towards that?
So, and there are many different options that you can, pursue, and obviously budget constraints is a strong consideration. I know that just in conversations with Mike, he had mentioned that the schools also does not have a dedicated human resources person. So, in a situation like that, one option is to say, okay, well, from a budget standpoint, does it make sense if the schools do not have a dedicated HR person, the town does not have a dedicated HR person, maybe both sides don't think it makes financial sense to have a fully dedicated person on either side of the ledger, but okay, maybe together it makes sense. That's one option, or you could have two HR people, maybe at a different full-time equivalency, maybe not a 1.0, but something less than that, dedicated to HR on each side. So those are options. We have clients that do share an HR person between the town and the schools. I will say there's a different set of HR issues sometimes on the school side. So if somebody's going to take on both those responsibilities, you would want to get up to speed on, it's Mass General Law, Chapter 71 is the school statute, teacher, and, there's the laws that apply specifically to teachers with respect to employment issues.
Does
So
that mean the size of the town and the amount of people would determine whether you could do it jointly, would have to hire individual ones, or?
there's no specific set number of employees that sort of triggers there's no magic number, so to speak. But obviously with a smaller community, you may look at the fact that, okay, you have a critical mass number of employees. When it hits a certain amount, then it makes sense. And if you add in the schools and the town, then surely it probably, you've reached that critical mass. So those are, that's an option to pursue, and obviously you have to get the schools on board with that as well, so.
And that would
something
follow the same model that we have with the chief technology officer, that where the superintendent and the town manager would work jointly to manage this individual, looking, community-wide, not just school, not just town, community-wide on HR would be the proposal, just as we're doing with technology.
The other issue is not only does the individual need to be up to speed on the laws, but also the different collective bargaining agreements in town, because in many respects, those collective bargaining agreements would trump a personnel bylaw or a policy, and the school's gonna have their own union as well. I do think, just as you say, a recommendation, I do think that it does make sense to have somebody focused on this issue. Whether or not you're sharing it with the schools in town, that's a decision that other people, you guys in the school committee need to make, whether it's a full-time person or a part-time person. But things do fall through the cracks when you don't have somebody focused on it. There's too many laws, they're switching too often. There's updates, there's collective bargaining agreements that are switching every 2, 3, 4 years. So there really is a lot. Also, I just sort of say, a typical, maybe an employee, a small employee disciplinary issue. The town manager, doesn't or shouldn't necessarily need to be involved in that. That's something the HR person could pick up and be involved in, take care of, and then bring a recommendation or a summary to the town manager for review and action. You're pulling somebody like the town manager away for smaller issues. It doesn't make sense.
So Brian, you thinking that like 2, 3, 4 weeks you'll have finished your review and?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
and I think I still have some questions. I talked to some of the people today who are in charge. I think I talked to Sandy, who's in charge of does the FMLA, and they had some policy questions there. So just trying to tie up some loose ends, and then we may have a packet. And what my hope is that this packet would be a good resource material for whoever is dedicated specifically to human resources. And, it doesn't answer every question, but it would be kind of a booklet that they could go to. And then if they need to ask questions of council, that makes sense, but it's a good starting point. I believe what you currently had was a binder with, not to say a mix of things, that mixed in employee-related issues with, parking permit issues or, just random town issues. So I don't think that's probably effective.
Hmm.
And also, they can solve problems before they get large.
I definitely think too, yes. Having somebody who can recognize, deal with something before it gets out of hand, or prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you your objectives in doing this review? Can you tell me what they are?
My objectives were to review what the town has currently as its policies and procedures in place, and then say, okay, what do we have now?
Right.
What should we have, and how do we bridge that gap? And, for example, I'm just taking an example, the sexual harassment, I'm sorry.
No, I'm going to call a timeout right there. Okay, so I got that part.
Yep.
So what should we have, would you consider that to be like best practices?
Yes,
Okay.
try to, yeah.
No, but I'm just trying to define it for myself, and I understand where you would go with the other things. And the reason I'm asking the question is that ideally, I would think that between your study and then communication with the board, we can define, or we should be able to define, the role and function of what we're trying to create. Okay? And that's one thing that I don't want to escape, because it's one thing to talk about meeting the letter of the law, which we recognize we have to do. But it's another thing entirely to recognize or acknowledge how we make this resolve problems before they become problems. how it helps for our staff to function more smoothly. As an example, I don't believe, I could be wrong about this, but I don't believe we have a standardized policy for performance review. And that to me is, that's a shortcoming for the employees. If you got two people doing a similar job, one of them is doing excellent work and the other one maybe not so much, how do you acknowledge the one who's doing the excellent work if, in fact, you don't have a standardized review or a review that is known and understood by all employees? So those are the types of things that I'm asking about. And I don't know if your work is going to encompass that as part of the recommendation, but I'm asking as an open-ended question because I hope it does.
Well, I think I will sort of distinguish between two items. One is what you're legally required to do in terms of laws for your employees, and then going above and beyond that and making, for example, you say the letter of the law. For example, I'm just going to use the sexual harassment policy on the books now. You are only required to have a sexual harassment policy under the MCAD, Mass Commission Against Discrimination, and under the Mass laws. What we would recommend to go above and beyond is to say, why not also incorporate into that the policy of non-discrimination for all protected categories under the law? That is not required, but that's something we would recommend in updating your policy. Your policy also had some other names that were out of date and incorrect information in it that we'd want to update too. But just in turn, that's a recommendation where I would say, here's what the floor of the law is, here's where we can make it better. Those are all issues that you are required to do sort of in terms of policies for your employees. Shifting over gears for a second, when you're talking about employee evaluations, I think that is a separate issue and maybe beyond the scope of what I'm doing in terms of what a HR person would want as sort of a resource book. A separate issue is, okay, how do you evaluate your employees? And, that's a little bit more of a broad topic. There's not, some union contracts might require and detail out how employees get evaluated. I know probably the teacher's contract does, not that that's under your purview. I don't know about the police and fire offhand. But that's something we could create and help your managers with. But even the HR person wouldn't necessarily be doing employee evaluations. That would be something for department heads to be trained on so that they could do. And, we can help with that. That is a little bit outside the scope of what I'm doing here.
No, I understand it can be outside the scope, and that's part of the reason for asking the question. But at the same time, if our department heads are going to be trained on that, they're going to need a resource. And in my mind, this function, this role, is that resource.
Yes, I think that in many towns, the department heads who, if they are doing evaluations, one, if they're doing them for union employees, that incorporates a separate issue. But even for non-union employees, yes, the HR person would be a resource in terms of how they should be doing it, in terms of a formula, if they have forms, how often they should do it, once a year, and, there should be some standardized process for that so they can help them along. In terms of the substantive evaluation, that's going to be done by the department head who actually knows the area of expertise that the employee should be competent in.
Right. And likewise, I don't want to get into the weeds, especially in an area where I'm not expert in by any means. But this was an example of one element of the role, and that's why I was asking the question. And it may be worthwhile, Mike, to start to define or to help the board understand what definition we would be using for the role, function, and responsibilities for this endeavor for human resources. And for what it's worth, I mean, if it's going to be discussion, I noticed that the chairman of the school committee is in the audience. If it's going to be a potential discussion with the school district, we should probably seek input from them as well.
I agree with that, absolutely.
So I've already had some preliminary conversations with the superintendent. I will continue to foster those discussions and come back with some broader definition on this.
Okay, thanks. I mean, it has to be useful to us, I would think. and then taking in what Brian is going to present formally and using that.
And I will say, between the superintendent and I, we spent hundreds of hours on union negotiations. This individual could help facilitate some of those components.
Right.
That, you know, extracts us from some of the discussion. We still need to be there for lots of the elements of that, but not necessarily for every little thing.
Okay.
So why don't we do this? In 4 weeks, on the 29th, we'll book an hour on this, and I think we've got two issues. One is FY15 budget, but also how we get through FY14, because there's such a gap. You know, what's the strategy for that?
Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yeah.
for clarification, you said for the budget objectives, what you really focus on is HR issues, because you're gonna do your
Well,
budget tonight.
it's kind of just on this function, this HR function, the
Okay.
gap that we have. We're looking at, long-range FY15, how we dealing with it, but also this fiscal year, FY14, what are we gonna do? We did get some money appropriated at town meeting. How far will that take us? Peter?
We've got money appropriated.
Yeah.
We've got $20,000 appropriated for policy and procedure creation, and we've got, I think, $16,750 for the actual resource to, do HR interaction.
Thank you.
That's already been approved, one at town meeting and the other one is embedded in the budget.
Okay, so, any more questions for Brian on this? And we'll see you when,
Thanks for coming in, Brian.
Okay, no, thank you.
when your review's done. Thank you very much, Brian.
Karen and Steve, sorry for interrupting, to bring Brian in here.
All right, the answer to your question. You had asked earlier, what does it mean to use the maximum available tax levy limit? And essentially what I was trying to refer to is that we have the capability every year to go up to the maximum 2.5% increase over the previous year on existing properties, or some number less than that. And I'm simply stating it that this proposes you use the maximum, the 2.5%, which, for what it's worth, is what we've been doing for as long as I can remember.
I just needed that clarified for
Yeah.
you, so thank you.
I'd really prefer not to, but
I know.
the basis, and again, it's not so much to lay this out and for the board to say, well, that's what we have to do, but rather to say, okay, well, here's the proposal on the budget priority, and here's the reasoning for it. And the basis for doing it that way is that now we're handing it back, whatever our proposal is, we hand it back to all of those interested and involved parties, advisory committee, town manager, et cetera. This becomes their guideline. Yep, here's what we want to do with the tax levy, and here's why we want to do it that way. And that was the basis for doing each of these numbered items.
I always get confused, right, this is my first budget this time, on the different types of budgets, the level service and level funded and.
Well,
Zero-based,
yeah.
there's all
Zero-based.
kinds, yeah.
The concept here was, as I wrote it, and this is actually kind of what I took out of the previous conversations we collectively have had, and recognizing that of late we've been fortunate to have a few surpluses, that it proposes level services, if you will, that our community would experience the same degree, level, and professionalism of services they've enjoyed throughout fiscal year 13. Okay, and that's the basic idea, and what I've referred to in here is, if you will, a level services budget, with the exception of addressing the HR function.
Steve, on the bottom, number 5,
Yep.
it just says, we anticipate non-union compensation increasing at 2.4%.
Typo.
Okay.
Typo.
That's what I wanted.
What I really wanted to say here is that non-union compensation increases would match those that have been negotiated with union compensation, which I believe is 2.5%. I told you, typing is not a skill of mine.
There's
So,
a couple of dates that are funny too, but we're not gonna pick on you.
Which ones?
2105.
Oh, yeah, 2105, I'm planning ahead. I'm planning ahead.
You're really
This
forecasting.
is a long range, huh?
Very long
God, I hope
range.
we're not still sitting here.
I agreed to a 10-year
2105.
capital budget, not 100.
Steve.
Yeah.
What,
Go ahead.
Little bug.
One thing, I might add, the Maintenance Stabilization Fund, which I was very happy to see voted in. It was something that I would always been concerned about. Would we add that into number one?
You can. You can absolutely do that. That wasn't identified specifically here, and typically you'd expect that to percolate out of the committees in any case. But if you want to delineate it, you can.
I mean, it was for me before, and it remains a big issue. I think that you spoke to the fact that we don't have the money to do our roads and our crumbling seawalls and things. So I think we need to I would like to attach some importance to it, and not just have it be an afterthought, that if there's some money left over, we put it in there.
Yeah, you can. I think I'd actually defer to Mike at this point about how that would be funded, but the long and the short of it is identifying it in a budget policy is appropriate.
And to pick up on that, I would probably suggest that we don't,
Excuse me.
that we don't focus on calling it a stabilization fund, because that's a separate fund that has to be established by town meeting. Town meeting has to do that.
What did town meeting establish?
That capital stabilization fund has been established.
Right, I knew
So that's
that.
a
That was a
capital.
long time.
Building.
But wasn't there something for maintenance?
There
Maintenance.
was, but what I want to focus on is, in our 5-year pro forma, is that we put aside money for maintenance, we put aside money for roadways, because during the middle of the year, when Carl needs to come out and do a new public roadway, and he wants to add to that, that there needs to be a review process for that, but the logistics of having a town meeting vote on that are there.
I understand all that, and I appreciate it, Michael. I guess I was just confused, obviously confused. I had in my head that town meeting had voted something.
I believe it was a building maintenance
Building
allocation.
maintenance.
Building,
Okay.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
building maintenance.
There's two funds under discussion at the moment, additional
Okay.
capital-oriented funds.
So, but roadways doesn't come under capital, does it?
Roadways is a new idea.
Yeah, and I think you can put those into
You
item
can-
number
you
one.
can, yeah.
I think, let's not discuss the implementation of that right now. I think
no,
the
no, no,
concept
okay.
of having roadways and the concept of having building
Infrastructure.
maintenance, it needs to be in there.
There is an existing fund for building maintenance. And as a matter of fact, the town manager proposes taking some of the surplus from fiscal year 13 and funding that. And then there's been a separate recommendation to establish a fund for road maintenance. And,
Could we include in that also our culverts and crumbling seawalls?
well, that's actually capital,
That's capital,
That's
okay.
capital.
Okay.
okay?
Uh,
So,
The
yes.
town of Braintree, they have a fund for roads. I was talking with Joe Sullivan, the mayor,
Yep.
and they do that. And they're very good at, and they maintain roads, and then when they get their Chapter 70 money from the state, they have plenty of money to do things.
I tell you, it's the battle that we fight all the time, Martha, and the
I know,
differences.
I know.
The differences that we have just between ourselves and Hingham because of the differences in tax base,
Yeah,
are what define what we have available to us.
I know.
So I think it's absolutely appropriate that you identify the establishment of separate funding for roads and buildings in the budget policy statement. It's always going to be a wrestling match to figure out how much we can put in.
Well, that's true, but at least it's there, and the electorate knows that they have to,
Right.
what we have to do. It isn't just one lump.
Simply going to the extent of establishing a mechanism sends a strong message to residents that we recognize the
Yeah.
need and we're dealing with it.
Right.
Okay, God knows, I wish we had the tax base that Hingham or Norwell or Braintree
We
had.
just don't have the businesses.
Right,
It isn't enough on 3A to have a separate level,
right, right.
So, just on this number one,
Mm-hmm.
so underneath, you're sort of delineating things that are included in the financial management policy, right?
It's a reiteration and a recognition of that policy.
Right, so I think first of all, it was 2012, and we don't need to go there, but, you know, maybe we can just more general, make it more of a general statement so that we can include.
You're right, I'm mixing things here. It's spring 2013, it was actually fiscal year 2013 in a town meeting,
Correct.
but it was spring 12, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
All
I'm
right.
sorry.
But, for example, if we wanted to build on this list to include, you know, roads or building maintenance or something, then we're getting outside of the actual financial management.
That's right,
Right?
right.
So we might wanna just make this, continue to adhere to
The
the
policies.
financial management policy and
Yeah, it's simply added as a separate
as
item.
a set asides, right?
A separate item, and you can put it as number 2, establish, establish and fund a road maintenance fund and continue to add to the building maintenance fund.
You could incorporate that as a B,
Or
under
as-
B, and be a subcategory under B.
Yeah,
Because
however,
that
right,
can fix the number 5 in the policies.
right.
So
Where do you,
we're
where do
on
you
board
want
with
this?
road and building maintenance, right?
It'd be under one, though,
Be under
sorry?
1B.
one B.
Or 1A.
Or one,
Yeah,
One B is defined by 5%, 1A is 5% in the budget for stabilization, 1B is
Okay.
the broader piece, which is 10% of the budget, so it would be under 1B for roadway and building maintenance.
Okay, all right. Jeff Nutting said for OPEC, in 30 years, no one will get it done. That it was
Well, again-
more to focus more on HR than OPEC.
no, in the scheme of things, he's right. The OPEB is going to take a longer time to, once you find and agree to a solution, it's gonna take a longer time to fund it.
Yeah, I know.
This very simply says, within the budget parameter, within the budget message, again, we've identified something that up until this point, well, even now, is off of our balance sheet. So in order to acknowledge it and bring it onto the balance sheet, we better have a plan to deal with it. So within the budget, that means we're going to have to continue to fund it. And that's simply, the reason for putting it here is to simply address that with the advisory committee, budget planning committee, with the town manager, with the finance director. So as the budget is developed, it requires their acknowledgement that this is an ongoing item from our perspective.
I'm gonna offer a suggestion that, because we just got this tonight, I think it's 95% or more complete, and it could be circulated as a draft to these other boards for comment, and then in 2 weeks, we officially vote it, but I mean,
I-
I'm ready to vote 95% of it right now.
No, again, I
Yeah.
brought this as a sample for you to look at and to think about, and, you're right, it does require, I should say, it probably would benefit greatly from,
Some input, but
Some
but
input.
I think it's really, it's excellent work. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Very
It is
good.
excellent.
Now,
Thank you.
the one thing I
Really
do
is.
want to caution the board about, though, is that this is our message.
Right, right.
So whatever comes back from any of the, from
We'll
any
take
of
it
the
in
committees
advisement, right.
or folks involved, remember, this is our message. And if you feel strongly about something, that within the confines of the budget, it sets the direction of the town, that this is our message,
Right.
okay?
What I'm hearing is that there's a slight amount of tweaking in that section 1, but otherwise, most of it looks really,
And-
doesn't need anything.
Well, I'd ask you, as you look at it over the next couple of days, think about what might be overlooked. But again, the purpose and goal of a budget message is to set the agenda broadly. If you will, if you think about it from that perspective, you say, look, we've got $38 million we have to expend this year. And from that, we know that we want to make sure that we deliver the same level of services we have in the past. We're fairly compensating our employees. We're taking care of areas of risk that we know exist, human resources and building and road maintenance, things like that. And it doesn't get into, and ought not get into, the nitty-gritty, because that is exactly what we're now passing off, given the direction. You know, we're the rudder, right? We're given the direction to the rest of the crew. The crew is going to come back and help us keep and hold the course.
Yeah. I guess I'm a little bit more aligned with Steve in that I'm thinking that this is our direction to the other
Yep,
committees.
yep,
And I'm wondering if we're not confusing the issue
by asking for input,
by
yeah.
asking for
Yeah.
input, because we're supposed to be telling
Yeah.
advisory and
Well, I
budget
guess then the
planning.
question, are we prepared to adopt it tonight?
Mr. Chairman, maybe if we just take 2 minutes and go over each item.
Yeah.
Then make that decision after you
Okay,
run through
all right,
all 6
yeah,
items.
yeah.
I think we've hit number 1 pretty good.
Yeah.
We've got 2 changes there, roads and building maintenance under 1B.
I was just gonna suggest maybe we just change the language a little bit, and while we're talking, I can
Go ahead.
try to figure something out, but just continue to adhere to the spring 2012 town meeting approved financial management plan and commit to, then A, building and maintaining stabilization fund balance, building and maintaining capital stabilization fund balance, seeking to achieve and maintain, right, just changing the tense, identifying and funding a solution for the town's OPEB liability, establishing a road maintenance fund, and continuing to fund building maintenance.
Good,
Okay.
Sounds good to me, Diane.
yeah.
Good to have,
Yeah, are you copying these down, or are you looking to me to do that?
Look at it, Dan.
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, when Jeff
Stacy
Nutting
is.
watches this video in 2 weeks, he's going to be very proud of that conversation that just happened over the last 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
We're trying.
so
You're
let me
trying.
ask you something. You've got this. Do you want me to make the changes, or do you want me to send you the file?
Send me the file.
Got it.
well,
Okay.
Stacy is taking copious notes.
Tracy.
Tracy.
Well, Stacy is too, but.
Stacy. Well, I have a friend that's
Stacy at
Stacy.
home.
I'm sorry, Tracy.
Hey, Stacy, don't worry, I've got you in
We've been called
2105,
worse.
so.
Trust
Yeah,
us.
you're not called
Uh,
Joe anyways.
Tracy, do you want the original file, or?
Yes.
Okay, I'll give you the original file, but it'll end up being,
Well, maybe we should wait until Diane
amended.
makes the revisions, and then
Yeah.
Tracy doesn't get confused having,
no, I'm just, I did give you the original file because it can be stored, and then the revisions come in with it. Because I presented it to the board,
Right.
you want the
oh,
original
I'm sorry, I
presentation.
misunderstood Steve.
Yeah.
Just another suggestion, you could follow the same model you did with the town manager solicitation. Vote each one of these subject to final, micro wording that'll come back for a final review, but at least the concept is approved for number 1, and then go on to number 2.
I
I'm
think
good
that's
with
a good
that.
idea.
Yeah,
Mm.
okay, so,
Subject to Diane's micro.
yeah,
Wording.
Yeah.
everybody got the changes on one? Any motion on that?
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0, okay. 2,
2 is use the maximum available tax levy limit.
yeah, I think eventually that hopefully changes, at some point down the road, but right now with the big OPEB liability and us getting on track,
Mhm,
we really don't have a choice but to do that.
mhm.
So does anybody have any changes to that? I see Diane's got something.
Just a small, I think the
Yeah.
hyphen, I think unresolved is one word. and then
Go right
maybe it
ahead.
can go
Yeah. Where's the
Go
one
ahead.
word?
First
right in the
line,
first sentence,
at the end of the
Oh.
first sentence,
but I'll confirm that.
Resolved?
unresolved,
She
take
thinks
the
it's one
hyphen
word,
out.
not hyphen. I think you're
Yeah,
right.
you're
Diane.
right, it is that
Yeah.
one word.
Okay. Do we have a motion on 2 as amended?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3?
Um, 3, basically, for those of you in the audience, is budget for the delivery of townwide services equivalent to those of the preceding fiscal year within the revenue sources available, which basically is a level services budget.
I would like to state that in there, just for stating the obvious.
Put it in parentheses.
That's
Uh,
fine.
Level service, the intent of this is a level services budget.
11.
just put a sentence, the intent of this recommendation is a level services budget.
Very good.
And just hyphens, I think townwide is a hyphenated word.
Okay.
It could be one word, but I'll double check that before I.
No,
Any
I
other
think you're right,
changes?
it is with a.
Hyphen, I
town-
think.
Yeah, hyphen.
Give a motion?
I wanna read through the
Well,
rest of it
there's- it
first.
goes over on here.
Yeah, just one
Um,
question
Yeah.
I have is, could you just elaborate on establishing procurement guidelines for non-30B purchases?
I can go on for hours on that, but,
How about 2 minutes?
actually, I defer,
Could we just
I
add
defer to Mike.
chapter CH in front of the 30B so people know it's Mass General laws?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Where is
But the short answer is I'd defer to Mike on it.
Yeah.
This is something that came up in the, I think the Jeff Nutting conversation the other night.
It has, and it's also part of
But
our,
before, yeah.
yeah, our DOR report too. Basically, this town, follows our public procurement laws. However, as part of those laws, there's a plethora of exceptions that don't comply, that you don't have to do out and do any competitive bidding. What we have begun to initiate is, and I'll give you an example for some of our engineering projects. Engineering is a service that may be exempt from public procurement. But Brian and I go out, Brian Joyce, the Director of Project Management and Planning, and I go out and we solicit 3 different bids, even though we're not required to, just for competitive purchasing. So to the extent where it makes sense to do that as a policy, the town should strive to always competitively bid, even if it's exempt. Because there are millions of dollars that are spent by the community, the town, that do not follow any, that are exempt. And there are some savings that are in there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's $200,000 of savings, but I am going to tell you that there are savings every time you force a contractor to sharpen his pencil.
The basic idea behind this, I and double I, is, refers back to section B in here, which talks about efficiency. And the objective in efficiency, from my viewpoint, is to free up resources to bring back to the town, okay? And, that may seem a little cockeyed at first when you think about it, but imagine if, but with the same amount of dollars, you could actually expand your services, all right? That's the idea behind this, and one of the ways to do that is not to look at head count, but look at how we conduct our processes. So, for instance, just doing a competitive acquisition model for procurement, maybe it leads to a 3 or 4 or 5% efficiency in what we're buying, but that money rolls back to the general fund. Likewise, if any entity can tell you if they can collect their money faster and they can get better terms when they pay it out, it falls right to the bottom line. In our case, the bottom line is the general fund. It means more resources available for our taxpayers, our residents. Okay, that's the idea behind this in the budget message, and the reason for codifying it inside of a message is to simply say to finance, to the town manager, we're looking for this. We're looking for better, sharper, smarter ways to do what we do.
Well, I'm on board with this because I was talking about this 3 or 4 years ago.
So it's, now by codifying, in putting it into writing, you're not only alerting our own
It makes it real.
finance department. We're intending to adhere to it.
Just for my own edification.
Yep.
The word establishing a revenue collection and disbursement process that streamlines and expedites the collection of blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
How far along in establishing that are we? Because I believe we've done a lot, at least that was in the DOR report.
We've done a lot, but we want to be in a position where we're providing more flexibility for the taxpayer to pay and purchase their permits and pay their fees online in an easier process. That reduces down window trips, that reduces down trips to town hall. There's more work that needs to be done compared to what we've done over the last year. So we're not complete there.
So establishing is an okay word.
Yeah, because I mean, we want this to
Refining?
be comprehensive.
Refining, I think is a
That's what
better
I'm
word.
wondering.
So
Is
yeah, it's fine,
establishing sound
again,
like
Yeah.
a ground zero.
fine.
Refining.
Good word.
Yeah,
And-
that bothered me, but I didn't quite know what.
To pick up on the central purchasing, as you may recall, 18 months ago, we established and rolled all of the office supplies in the town budgets into the town manager's office so that there's a central purchasing function. Now, again, that's not town-wide, that's just everyone within town hall. And when you go back and look at what revenue was turned back over the last 2 years, you actually saw revenue that was turned back in office supplies and things that historically may not have been. So there's clear, tangible examples that by establishing these processes, that they work. And by the Board of Selectmen establishing here's your policy, it will have more legs and it will continue in more in perpetuity than annual budget processes.
Steve, I'm going to think that you picked up the major recommendations from the DOR report.
I'm trying to be fairly general about this as opposed to saying, from the budget message, saying you must do A, B, C, and D.
Yeah, no, I'm not implying that, but the big broad
Yeah,
issues.
the big picture, look, I mean, whether it's DOR report or preceding management letters from our auditors and so on, these are long-standing
Oh, absolutely.
shortcomings of ours. And, I think the right word is refining when you talk about the revenue collections and so on, but that's been mentioned for at least the past 7 years.
Mhm.
So the fact that we've got it started is great. This simply says, let's keep it going,
Right.
okay?
Do you want to look at that? That's a deal, just because I've been flipping through it the whole time we're talking, so
Oh,
if it
okay,
helps
thank
at
you,
all,
Diane, I
can
did
look
not
through it.
bring it with me, so thank you.
What was that?
Are we ready to accept 3 as amended?
Yes,
So moved.
Do a
second.
second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0.
When did we get this?
Okay, number 4.
A long time ago. Oh, I don't think I have one.
This is probably the most consequential budget initiative we have.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Human
I-
resources function.
Establishing a human resources function. Yeah, I think there's a few copies out in the audience, but I think there are a few others if they need to be passed about.
Yep, they're out there.
Okay. And again, the wording in this is simply a suggestion.
So I, just to start, would like to maybe recommend, instead of the end of that fourth sentence,
Yeah.
sentence under 4, where it
Yeah.
says needed to build the HR department,
Mhm.
I would say needed to build a comprehensive HR plan or a
Function.
Function,
Okay,
function.
Comprehensive HR function. I like the word comprehensive.
good.
All right.
Because it doesn't imply a department, or
Right.
you don't want Peter to worry. We're being
He's
good
no worry.
stewards here.
I forgot a period here.
Yep.
Under B.
Yeah, I think it's good, because
Diane,
C,
thank
we
you.
don't know what we need.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
right, but we do have to account for it in the budgeting, even though it's
That's right.
kind of,
Mhm.
kind of
Yeah,
vague,
Yeah.
so.
right.
Are we
So,
ready to accept 4 with that change?
so moved.
Do you have a
Second.
second? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0. Number 5. You had Do we need to get the matching, the union concept in there, or,
Match union contract. Do you wanna put
that was the
in?
intent, Steve, to match the.
Right,
It
right.
says it in the last sentence, we anticipate non-union compensation increasing at 2.5%.
Oh, right, right.
in line
Yep,
with
yep.
negotiated union
Excellent. Yep.
increases.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that that's accurate, that the numbers are accurate, Mike.
On the
match.
town side, it is, the school has some flexibility.
Well, I
Depending.
mean, but, okay, but does any of our budget, other than
No.
the shared areas, have an impact there?
No, it does not.
Well, they have steps.
The town
We-
side is the 2.5%.
We don't have, I thought, well, we don't have steps, no.
We do have steps.
That's
We
what
have
I
a
thought we had
10 steps and 15 grades.
Wouldn't that be the same though as the teachers?
Their step process is different,
Yeah, okay.
different contract. And then there are multiple unions that the school committee is responsible
Yeah,
for.
I know that, yeah.
Teachers, cafeteria
Yeah.
workers, et cetera.
So, there's a big phrase missing here, pending resolution of the HR function.
Yeah.
We plan to budget for approved headcount consistent with the 2014 fiscal year 2014 approved budget. This is simply an acknowledgement that we're not, short of what takes place in HR or doesn't take place in HR, we don't anticipate an increase in the employee population.
With that one exception.
With, with whatever that exception is.
Whatever that is, yeah.
Okay? And then the second piece there is the town's administrative structure will be consistent with the fiscal year 2014 budget. And that essentially says, we're not anticipating reorganization. Okay? New departments, things like that. Now, again, keep in mind, this is a collective budget message, and I'm simply taking that based upon the conversations that we've had. There's been no agreement to this. So I'm not trying to put words in the board's mouth, but rather simply encapsulating the general areas that on which we've had discussion.
Just for clarification, when you're saying the town's administrative structure, you really mean the town's administrative headcount?
Well, actually, what I'm trying to say is the org chart doesn't change,
Mhm.
okay? That's really what I'm trying to say. And
Why
I'm
don't we
not,
say that the town's organizational structure?
maybe that's the better way to say it.
Yeah.
When I say administrative structure, Mike, I'm talking about the organizational structure. So this is, part of this is, you may remember the previous town manager came forward and structured a department without the authorization of town meeting, and it caused quite an uproar at the time.
Well-funded positions, yeah.
And the point here is that from the budget message, the board has to set forward, with respect to what we're doing, what we expect to have come back to us in the budget. So, if there's a sense of the board that we in fact are looking at creating a department of roller coasters, we should identify that, all right? Otherwise, let's move forward.
How about Ferris wheels?
I can see the ledger tomorrow.
Mike?
Question.
Yeah.
155 Sawyer Street. Reading that first line in 5, pending resolution, we plan to budget for approved headcount consistent with the fiscal year 2014 approved budget. It has the interpretation of a headcount freeze for employees. Now, that, I presume it's not what the intent is, correct?
It's not so much a freeze, Paul. It's very simply looking at it, saying, okay, if we're gonna produce level service, we've got a level services budget, we're going to do it within the employee structure that we have.
And that doesn't impact the schools,
No,
okay.
totally
Okay.
understand, 'cause we're-
And by the way, the missing piece there,
From the reading of it, it looks as if that may be a freeze, and that may be not what you necessarily,
there's,
you wanna try to keep the structure similar, without adding another division.
right, there's no implication of anything other than we don't anticipate, short of, and you may not have heard the insertion here, pending resolution of the HR function, okay? We plan to budget,
Aside from that, I just wonder whether headcount should be changed to a different word.
I can see his question, because the schools may have to hire more people.
well, that's none of our concern.
Well, I know that,
Doesn't
I know
impact
that.
us.
I know it
Should
doesn't
be,
impact us,
Additional,
but
whatever.
Well, again, it is a working document, I agree. I'd rather not refer to people as head count.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
regardless whether.
Yeah.
Something general staff.
verbiage people, did
F-
anybody?
How
FTE
about-
equivalent?
50 that's
Well,
I guess I would just make it.
but-
carbon units.
Yeah, I might wanna,
People
I might
might
wanna
think that.
water this whole thing. I mean, because
yeah.
pending resolution of the HR function. You know, is that opening this up to more interpretation, which is a good thing, but my whole thing is, what if we find, efficiencies? We're talking, when we're saying approved headcount, you know, what if we,
Well,
what
levels-
if we can
yeah.
find, I mean, you know, we did it last year.
Always go down.
That's right.
Yeah, you can always.
You could have a not to exceed in there.
Well, you know,
As
I
long
was
as
gonna
the level
suggest that.
services are level, and you find efficiencies, that you could, through attrition, go down without affecting the level services.
Yeah.
Right, I mean,
Right, we
heaven forbid we should find such a thing, because then you've got the pleasure of determining whether or not you have the ability to reduce your cost structure or increase your services by redeploying those folks to a different area.
Peter?
I think you need to, you gotta remember what this is. This is the assumptions to do the 2015 budget. So
Yeah.
you need to have a headcount assumption or a population assumption or a, whatever you wanna call it. Otherwise, you know, I don't wanna come back here
Employee
December
population.
with, you know, people in the budget that, you guys don't want.
Have you another word for head count?
I think he just said it.
He just said it.
Population.
Employee population.
Employee population.
So right now, what if we're at pending resolution of the HR function, we plan to budget for approved employee population consistent with the FY 2014 approved budget. The town's organizational structure will be consistent with the FY 2014 budget. We
Which says
anticipate,
you're guaranteeing a secure position.
we anticipate non-union compensation increasing at 2.5% in line with negotiations.
Take out the first approved.
If it
Yeah.
approves. Mr. Chairman, I do have a couple of other comments.
Yeah.
After you vote this.
Pending resolution of the HR function, we plan to budget for.
An employee population consistent, take out the approved.
Well, I know
With
that,
fiscal year
that the
14
schools,
approved
I know
budget.
that the schools decide on their employees, but the people reading this, all people don't understand that. That's why if we change the head count to employee population or something, it's probably an improvement.
We could.
I think
we
the
could make
chairman
the
can
distinction of-
articulate that to anyone on the school side, what the intent here is.
Yeah.
What if we
Well,
just
I'm
add
talking about the
town
ordinary
employee population?
Town,
I would just replace with staffing,
staffing, yeah, that's better, yeah,
use
staffing,
some other verbiage, but I just say
staffing, okay.
I can live with that.
That's true.
Yeah,
Trying to use too many
Right.
big words.
yeah.
You wanna read it one more time?
Pending resolution of the HR function, we plan to budget for staffing consistent with the FY 2014 approved budget. The town's organizational structure will be consistent with the FY 14 budget. We anticipate non-union compensation increasing at 2.5% in line with negotiated union increases.
That's good.
Okay, is that
That's
all
good,
set?
yeah,
Do we have a
yeah, that's
motion?
fine.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0.
You got a question for me?
Yeah, Peter,
Just had a couple of comments.
yeah.
We have another we've got 6.
We got one more, yeah. You
Yeah,
just want to make a
one
few
more.
comments.
Peter Pescatori, Advisory Committee. I want to congratulate the board on the first ever assumptions for a budget. I think this is a momentous occasion.
Thank you.
The guidelines will allow everybody involved in this to work through within a parameter and deliver a budget that,
We'll take the
Meets
thank yous,
these.
but the credit really goes to Steve for organizing it.
well,
Kids in
it makes
college, throw
everybody
donations.
else's, makes everybody else's job a lot clearer. So we don't have to redo a lot of things and have false starts. So I think this is a big step for the town and a very good direction. So, having said that, I think there's a couple of items that, if you really want to make this comprehensive, that you need to really consider, and the first one is capital. While you're setting out the budget parameters, I think you need to set and certainly Jack can weigh in on what that should be, but you ought to set a specific limit, whatever it is, 600,000, a number like that, to be available for fiscal 15, and also talk to the renovation of Town Hall as a separate item.
Town hall, right.
Whether you're gonna do it, or, contemplate it or not, I think that should be direction given to the capital committee so they know what they're dealing with. And the other thing that I think you want to consider is that the Elder Center project was financially slated to come on in late 2015. In other words, the center was supposed to be functional, open, and available for use, at least on paper. This presupposes, if you're going to have a level staffing, presupposes that there won't be any folks available to add to the staff of that. But that doesn't mean you couldn't do it. You could always do it at town meeting, which I think is where this whole issue needs to come anyway.
Wait, the seniors, you talk about 15, are you talking about fiscal 15
Yes.
or calendar year 15?
Fiscal 15.
FY 15,
Yep.
okay?
Yeah, right now, you're not making any provision for additional funding or headcount.
No,
for that.
this document doesn't do any of that.
So I think a comment to that effect, or just saying will be reserved for town meeting, because you can always do it at an annual town meeting. You bring it up and vote the money out of stabilization. It's it's done. That's how it's done.
I think there's, I mean, in my mind anyway, there's a lot of discussion to be held yet in regard to that issue, isn't there?
Well, it was a 15 project, so.
Two good points.
I don't know what the status of it is today. I haven't heard anything on the
I don't either.
fundraising or, so, but I'm just bringing that up as what you've approved. It does not make provision for funding, any special funding or headcount for that.
No, it does, it
So
makes
whether you
none.
want to make a statement in there or just leave it silent,
Well,
is
let me
fine.
ask a question on the town hall renovation also while we're on capital. Is that in the 5-year plan right now?
It is not.
It is not in the approved 5-year plan. We have a wish list of things we want to get done, and town hall's in one of that, but we haven't
But
budgeted for
But this-
that.
Michael, haven't you represented that can be accommodated within our?
Yes, and Peter's, the first thing Peter brought up was capital. Capital is already addressed through number 1, which ties back into our financial management policies under number 5.
5%?
So the
10.
capital's fine.
10.
Capital is 10, right?
Capital's 10 for debt
Stabilization
service
is
in
five.
there.
That's stabilization fund.
No, it's different.
No,
It's-
the capital stabilization fund, yes. But that's, the target is 10% on that, 10%.
To
of
get
the
it down to that.
To get it up
10%
to
of the
that.
operating budget?
Yeah,
I
up to
thought
that.
capital was
Is to have
above
it-
10%.
No, that's bond,
That's,
Okay.
that's principal and interest.
Right. So capital's done. The renovation of town hall, and Karen, to your point, I had represented it at this, whether it's a $2 or $6 million project, we have the debt service, what that would be from our rating agency. And with those, I think the numbers that I have demonstrated could fit within item number 5 of our financial management policies on debt service and capital stabilization, that we could afford that debt service. But the real question comes down to what Peter's getting to is should the board make a determination that some form of renovation to town hall needs to be done? You don't have to commit on whether it's a $2 or the $6 million plan or something like that. But to allow the capital budget committee and everyone else to continue to move forward, that's a really important policy piece that needs to be addressed.
The
I'm
primary
not sure
issue.
it can get done in this fiscal year.
Well, but that's really
There's so many
exactly
issues.
what I'm.
Hold
Yeah.
on,
Yeah,
but
but
as a
there's-
budget priority,
Should
if I
we
if I
spend
may.
time on it or not? That's
Yeah.
really the question.
Right.
As a budget priority, this came up, some funding was asked of community preservation, capital budget from my time on there was presented with this on a number of occasions, and the problem has consistently been the same thing. First of all, you've got an asset. The town has an asset in town hall, but that asset is crumbling. And it also presents the potential for safety hazard to employees and abutters. Or as the fire chief will tell you, it's a tinderbox. So from that perspective, you know you've got a crumbling asset, and to let it continue to crumble is wasteful. But at the same time, the renovation can take one of two courses. One is you can make it a modern renovation based on its existing footprint, which would maximize its space, make it energy efficient, and in all likelihood, give us a very functional piece of property. Option B is to take on a historic renovation. By definition, it has less flexibility to it. And there is, I don't think that there has yet been a determination made by anybody, or certainly by the town as a whole, as to what direction we're going to take. Option A is probably less expensive. Option B, the historic renovation, is in all likelihood more expensive.
Very
And there's a third option too. You stabilize the building and you talk about completely redesigning this building and expanding it. So, when you start talking about $6 million, you can start doing a lot of things. And
That's what
some
they're
of us have
discussing right
said,
now.
Yeah.
why spend $6 million on a system that doesn't work very well? Why not stabilize the old building, turn it into a library, something like that, and think about renovating this building so it works? So that's a third option. And none of this has been vetted yet. I mean, we're a long way away from getting any
Well,
answers.
has the committee, have you interviewed the committee lately?
Let me jump in there. The committee is looking at that option as to the component of this building. When they came to present to the board in early September, I think it was, or late August, is they presented that analysis that they're going to now start to look at this side of the building to
Okay,
expand that.
okay.
So that is being looked at by them. We're certainly not in the 2015 budget going to rebuild Town Hall and that, as Jack's saying, but whether it's the renovation that includes the old Town Hall or the new side of Town Hall, money will have to be spent. There will be hundreds of thousands of dollars that'll have to be spent on engineering and design. And this gets back to Peter's point, is should we be looking at that from a policy standpoint, not on what the final piece is going to be, but the board is prepared to recommend that money be spent to start the engineering, the design, and to continue to explore all the alternatives. Because right now, we're just taking this to a conceptual design level at 10% based upon what town meeting had approved before.
But can we afford it? I mean, this is a FY budget, FY15 budget, so.
It's not,
we're-
nothing that addresses town hall is going to come out of the operating budget.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay, it's gonna come out of capital to
Right.
the extent that it's historic. We may go back and ask, we
CPC.
could conceivably go back and ask CPC for it, but I would argue that you'd end up looking at it as a capital item.
And my concern is that we get shoehorned into renovating that building or this building or the both, when probably the best thing to do could potentially be stabilizing that building and renovating this building. So we just want to explore all the options so we don't end up with, a Model A with
Well,
When you
boomboxes
say
in the back and
stabilize
front
that
seats.
building, Jack, you mean the old town hall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think politically, nobody wants to, the old town, people have said, knock down Old Town Hall and build something new. I don't think politically that's a viable option. I think the building has to be,
Let me ask this question. This is a
I have no great love for it, but.
budget message.
Right.
So what is it, from your point of view, that you need the Board of Selectmen to state in this? I mean, if what we're going to be having is engineering and it's gonna come out of capital and CPC,
It's the identification that it's a priority.
Right. It's
So
really
that's
number
what- that's-
7.
make it a
It's a
priority.
new thing here that
It's a new
something has to be done to
that
town hall.
we
and it's-
recognize that the town hall renovation or whatever
Is
Yet
this
to be
is a
defined.
priority and
Needs to be
that,
dealt with in the budget.
and that funds will be expended.
Needs to be dealt with within the parameters of the budget.
Okay.
Again, it's a public document, but it's really direction to,
Right.
to the different committees.
Okay.
Can I just take a step
And-
back to the issue, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna move on, so.
Oh, the issue Peter raised about the senior center.
That's where I was gonna go.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jeff.
So I'm just talking about the mechanics of it. Let's say Glenn got everything in place, we got the funding, we're ready to go, and we actually start building, and it becomes an operational budget for fiscal year 2015. You know, we would, if we didn't want to change the funding we do for town hall, and we don't want to change the funding for schools, we would actually have to do an override and increase our operating budget by a step increase of, say, like, maybe it's $250,000.
No, you'd have to
I-
go,
I-
you'd have to go to town meeting and just get it out of stabilization.
But then you'd be taking it out of stabilization going over time.
At a
It's
one time.
It's a
and-
step increase, though.
Well, that would be one time, and then, you could do it as an override.
Yeah.
The question is, do you need to do it as an override?
Yeah.
And permanently, make it permanent in the tax base?
Right.
And what I'm suggesting is you can probably,
Mr. Chairman, timeout on override.
The senior center really is unsettled at this point. I mean, we don't,
And it's
they're
not the-
moving forward with it, we don't know where they're
What they're
at
doing.
in it. We don't know, if town meeting votes to accept the building, we have no idea what the operating and maintenance costs of those are going to be.
Well, I
So
would hope-
help
I
me to
hope- I would
understand
hope
what
of-
you need
right.
for us to put into the budget. Is it just
I
identifying
would argue it's not our
it?
issue yet.
no, the only thing I'm pointing out is that, given the assumptions you're making for the budget, you're relegating any activity to the senior center to town meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I think
Let's
we-
do this,
Okay.
let's do this. There's the
I see.
budget message, which we're dealing with
That's all.
tonight. And then there's a couple of things that we could look at instead of being in the budget as being articles on the floor town
Right.
meeting,
Yeah.
where we could handle it then. If there's budget ramifications, then we've got,
But we
just
and
have
we
to figure it
also
out.
expanded the employees in the elder affairs last budget.
You're in charge, you can do
No, but
anything you want.
Yeah.
we're just talking.
Wait, if I may, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but having spent some time on the Budget Planning Committee with Peter, his question addresses a lot of the work that the Budget Planning Committee is going to do, not just for this budget, but for looking out. So in other words, the building would have to be constructed, and we would have to be ready to take receipt of that building by June of 2015 for it to fit within the fiscal 15 budget, okay? But if it doesn't fit within the fiscal 15 budget, his 5-year plan has to pick it up in fiscal 16, okay? Because
Right.
it still makes the assumption that it's going to be here, but everything has to continue to increase in value, salaries associated with it, et cetera, along those lines.
I understand that, but I'm just dealing with
No,
this
no,
right
I know.
now.
I know. So where I'm going with that is, by simply putting in this message that we recognize that it's an intended project for fiscal 15, but defer to town meeting vote for its funding.
I wouldn't put anything
I
in.
don't think you need to put anything in.
I don't think you put
I just
anything in.
brought it up as
I-
the
I
way you're
think-
Okay,
structuring
something to be
this.
thinking of, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
all right.
it
'Cause it's
pre-con-
All right,
you're
so-
saying, you're basically saying.
It's on our
you're not
radar.
providing anything, so it's a town meeting issue if it looks like it's gonna
Right.
be coming,
Yeah.
Or, I mean, we have
which is
some
fine.
months
There's nothing wrong with that.
to make, to talk and explore and make revisions if necessary. So do
Yeah, but overrides, just be careful with overrides. We're already number 10 in the state in tax rate.
The only
and
reason
overrides
I
forever.
I don't want to be, my good friend here is, I don't want an override, but you have to think about the mechanics of how you do the budget. If we ended up with a $250,000 increase, you could take it out of stabilization funds without changing the levy, but that would take money out of stabilization funds. It's a big balloon, right? You squeeze it, the
Well,
money's got to go
I
somewhere.
think
But just for the
Tom
practical.
does this to me all the
Just in the
time.
practical sense, it's gonna be late in 15.
Yeah.
So it'll be nominal,
But-
Yeah.
and you'll be able to slide it through.
Yep,
And then
yep.
it's a 16 issue, really.
Yeah. I agree.
Tom does this to me all the time. He talks about the what-ifs and all the parameters, and he drives me absolutely bonkers because
Or get rid of them.
Yeah, that all like, no, I just tell him he's driving me bonkers. That, I need to focus on exactly what is it that you want from us here this evening with this message. And then we can have
Just
all
to
these other
approve the message.
discussions.
Yeah.
Just approve the assumptions, so that
All
the-
those other
all the
things
other
can be
committees
talked
can
about
get
and
going.
discussed, and I
Yeah.
anticipate they will be. But if we can just get this, and I think that the town hall one was an
Make it a
excellent,
priority, that's great.
an excellent suggestion.
I think the chairman recognized the senior center is duly noted.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
also,
so-
just for clarification from
Yeah.
the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Selectmen is not supporting an override.
No,
We're
no.
talking
Thank you.
about an override.
There is
There's
the
no
capital budget
override on the
committee.
table.
Right.
No.
And we want to make sure the taxpayers understand that's not part of the discussion at this point.
They can call Jack.
Yeah.
My phone's off.
Thank you, Mr.
He's not
Chairman.
listed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
Okay, so we need to do item 6. Any changes on 6?
Um,
The basic idea behind this is that we have a surplus, an allocation was laid out, an allocation of that surplus was laid out in slides we saw, was it 2 weeks ago? But the long and the short of it is that allocation follows the fiscal policies that we had adopted at the 13 town meeting. So again, they're going back into stabilization, general stabilization to continue to build that fund. They're going back into OPEB, they're going to capital, they're going to fund the two new funds.
Nothing into the operating foundation.
Yes, nothing to increase the operating fund.
Can I have a motion on 6 then?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'm still trying to understand it.
Okay,
sorry.
yeah.
No, but go ahead.
It just funds those two maintenance funds that we want, roads and buildings. It puts a little more money into capital stabilization, and it puts a little bit more into the town stabilization.
I guess my only concern is, does it restrict it in any way?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it restricts the surplus from going back into the general fund.
Right, but if there were, I guess I'm just trying to think if there was something
Let me
else that we
simplify
had.
it even further than that,
You'd
is
actually
that,
come back around and, for instance, if we had an emergency and you say, well, why don't we just use the surplus? Okay, the free cash. Well, you would, but you'd just go back around to
Go through
stabilization to
to
get it.
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Basically, what it does is, any type of one-time cost consistent with our financial management policies has to go to one-time expense. It
Fine.
doesn't go to ongoing cost.
Yep.
That's,
Doesn't get built in the budget
Budget.
base.
Correct.
Right.
Should we,
Doesn't become part of the foundation.
should we articulate that
I would
in
like
number
to.
6?
well, it's already articulated in the financial management policies, so this is reconfirming it in a little bit more detail, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to be general about this as opposed to
Right.
very specific. And that's why the reference goes back to the policies that were adopted by town meeting on a pretty regular basis. If you want to be more specific about it, again, this is the board's message. That's fine.
Yeah. Diane, what did you have in mind?
So,
I haven't really fully thought it out, but other than to say that, any budget surplus will be allocated for
One-time cost.
one.
One-time cost.
One,
Cost.
well, again, and again, a cost in this case is a deposit to a fund as well,
right, that's
okay?
the distinction.
Okay. All right.
I'm a little concerned about this.
Which part?
Well, is it restricting?
Well, our financial policies are restricting on one-time revenue.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit more discussion on this.
Yeah, Martha, the goal of the restriction is to keep from building the operating base, okay?
Oh, okay, then you've answered my question.
Okay, that's the goal of the
Yeah,
restriction.
yeah, okay.
What if we, and I love how you said allocate the FY 2015, not 13, instead of any,
Where are we?
right here.
Yeah,
Shouldn't it be,
This is 13.
Could be any.
it should,
Allocate
Well,
the
I
fiscal
al-
year 13 budget surplus, which exists.
how about
right, but
like
this
any?
is but this is a budget message for 2015.
Well, if we end up enacting that at town meeting, it very simply says, what it's saying to the people formulating the budget is, don't go trying to raid that free cash to build into the operating budget.
Right.
That's the basis for it.
This is a technical question, but Mike, are there any grants that we are funding positions with that this would affect?
Yeah.
that funding?
No, last year,
One-time
we made it
grants
a,
that could go into the base.
yeah, we actually have that written in the policies that, because we put this in here 2 years ago, so that on the town side is grants shall not, one-time expenses shall not fund ongoing operating cost.
So a grant can't,
So we can't
grant
accept
to
a
do
grant
some
for
work
salary.
can't morph
Not-
into a
right.
full-time job
Yeah.
paid out of operations. That's the whole
It-
point.
Well, we
could
could
be.
accept a grant, but we have to go into it knowing that we're gonna build this into a base.
We've made a decision that we were gonna fund that irregardless of the grant. We'll take the
Right.
money.
We'll take
Yeah.
the front side of the money to help
Yeah.
us get it going.
Yeah.
But that's a conscious decision that would have to be made as a policy.
Yeah, as opposed to, we've got the grant, we've hired the person, now we've
So
got the
in other
person, the
words,
grant's
You
gone.
wanna spend the surplus before, the town meeting.
No, we just want to lock the surplus. This would lock the surplus into a surplus account, into a stabilization accounts. It's not spending it, it's
Okay,
just,
Okay, all
it's
right.
just,
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, well, you get the
I mean,
fiscal
it's-
policy, if
Okay,
you-
Diane
if
has
it
an
made a
amendment.
little- Okay.
Well,
let's-
maybe. First of all, I want to just change, I was
Any?
thanking, yeah, I want to change the word "the" to "any."
Yeah,
So it would say allocate any FY, and I think we're talking 2014 budget surplus.
No, it's
It
13,
is?
yeah.
It's
So that's
230.
last year's?
Yeah.
Yes, it's last
But
year.
it-
I
yeah.
see, it's coming here now.
Right.
Got it, all right, sorry about that, okay. So allocate any FY to, the
13.
budget surplus to, this is where I don't know, to one-time costs, allocate them to stabilization funds, allocate them to blah, 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 in accordance
Two
with.
stabilization funds in accordance.
No, because the roads and, you know, you need to have
That's not a
access. You can't
stabilization.
No,
say
it isn't.
stabilization.
You
The
need the
one-
roads.
Allocate.
Road and building maintenance and roads can't be stabilization.
it's the one-time cost.
Would you wanna specify each one in here?
You know, if we go back to item number
fiscal
3 in the
management policy.
financial management
Yeah,
policies,
I know.
ongoing
I know.
operating costs will be funded by ongoing operating revenue sources.
Okay.
This protects the town from fluctuating service levels and avoids concerns with one-time revenues are reduced or removed. This gets into your point about a grant. If a grant's removed, you know, you can't have a position funded for it. And then if you go down to 3C, it says all new services, equipment, and personnel proposals shall include the full life cycle cost analysis prior to budget approval. So when you're gonna add a position, it's the position plus the liability for that position over time.
So, you know what, I think the cleanest thing to do is leave this the way it was, with the exception of changing the word any. So it says allocate any FY 2013 budget surplus in accordance with the fiscal policies adopted by the 2013 annual town
Yeah,
meeting.
that's
That's
pretty
it.
specific.
Okay,
All right.
Okay.
13, yeah.
And A,
They were voted in
that's right.
12, but they were voted in 12, but it was part of
The
the fiscal year
2013
13 town meeting.
We gotta be
okay.
consistent
Do
with
we have a
that
motion
earlier
on that?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, why don't we vote the whole thing now with all
Wait
the
a minute, Mr.
amendments?
Chairman, number 7, we talked about
right, the town
for
hall.
town hall, and I would suggest it has 3 components. That the Board of Selectmen is, the renovation of town hall is a priority of the Board of Selectmen. The second point is the final outcome of what that renovation is yet to be determined. And the third point is whatever the final outcome is, it has to be done within the existing tax structure, which by definition means it has to be done without an override.
Does that mean, however, that you couldn't do it as exempt debt?
It means that if you're going to come back and try to do something different than this policy, you have to come back and have the board reverse its policy later on. Could it be done as exempt debt? Yeah, but you have to come back and ask the board later on, to says, yeah, I know this is your policy,
Go to the board.
but you're the board, and do you now want to do it as exempt debt? Right now, the direction is, by what I've just said, is try to work it within the existing tax structure.
We should try to work.
Shall do.
Well, I think that you might get some people
Yeah.
wanna have, they might, did you think it was too draconian, that's all.
I guess my issue is jumping something that isn't even on the 5-year
Yeah.
capital budget plan right into
Yeah.
a top priority in a budget message.
We tried.
I don't know if I'm ready to do that right now.
No,
I think this, I think we need to explore more what, CPC money is available, and seems to me this can be handled as an article at the annual.
It can be, however, this is not a topic for the message, but rather a topic for us. I do believe that the direction of the board would go a long way to helping determine where it should be in the capital plan. I gotta tell
Yeah.
you, from my own experiences, this has been booted around capital planning for quite a while. And part of the problem is what I was describing before. Are we saving a historic structure, or are we trying to use what's there?
How about this, a
So-
50,000-foot message that the renovation of Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen, and we're asking all boards to review options and during this budget cycle, and, with the idea being if everything can gel into an article, we're on the floor at the annual
Yeah, and our.
with the next step.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's good, yeah.
I would add one other
Yeah.
item to that, and that I would simply direct the interested parties working on this to determine the best course of action for its highest and best use.
So what is the real message here? Because
It's a concern, it's a concern of the board, we'd like to see
so
action.
Continue.
When you're saying the highest and best, are you talking about the renovation committee, or are you talking about
Or is it a real
capital?
estate
The outcome.
value, yeah.
The outcome. The highest and best use, again, that's a very subjective approach.
No, but I guess I'm just trying
Right.
to determine are you directing that to the committee that's working and providing us with options, or are you
Actually-
directing it to capital, or both?
Capital, town hall, what's the committee actually called?
It's a town hall study committee, because they then have to
Town-
report to capital,
So
the
it's-
selectmen,
Town hall study
everybody.
committee, and the reason I'm saying it that way is that, again, yeah, it'd be nice to look for CPC money, but if CPC money comes with a string attached that says it's gotta be for a historic renovation, and I'm making an
Yeah,
assumption.
it could not be cost-effective. at
Right,
all,
it might not be
yeah.
cost-effective to do it, and I'm just
But we
trying
have
to
to
not back
explore all the
ourselves in.
options, we have to
Right.
know what
All
the
right, so
answers are, yeah,
review
what
all
the
the
trade-offs.
options to its, what did you say?
Review all the
Highest, best use?
Highest and best use.
Because what you're saying from a policy standpoint, it's not if we're gonna do the town hall, you're saying you're gonna do the town hall. We don't know what that option's gonna be, but by your policy direction, everyone's putting resources into trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
So how do you feel
Okay.
about that, Fred?
Well, I think it definitely needs more exploration and
Yeah,
understanding
yeah.
of the trade-offs. I just don't
Yeah.
think like we're
Are
ready to
you-
put it right on number one the first year. Yeah,
Make the strategic statement, and then the rest is
It's-
tactics.
yeah,
If we
yeah.
say it's a
It's-
concern.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
I think Diane's working
Fred,
on
I
that.
don't think this is, I don't think this becomes a final plan even for town meeting.
Okay, all right.
No,
It's still
I just
far
didn't want it
off.
to be interpreted as, okay, this goes on year one of the five-year capital plan, and, we're off to the races, so.
No, but it
No.
needs a good boot in the butt,
I
and
think
that's,
it's gonna take a long
Yeah.
time to figure this out.
Yeah, okay, so Diane, you almost ready?
a writer,
Diane's our
Wordsmith.
scribe.
And best and highest?
highest and best.
highest and best use.
Well, here's what I got so far. The renovation to Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen, is it which, Agnes? The board which directs, or who directs? The renovation of Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen, which directs relevant town committees to research and evaluate. That?
That directs.
You could just put a period in it and say, the board directs.
How about the future renovation? Does that help it?
The future renovation of Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen. The board, we'll get rid of that. The board directs relevant town committees to research and evaluate options for highest and best use of what?
The facility.
Options, highest and best use, well, best use of the facility.
Yeah, 'cause
Of the facility, or the facility as redesigned, or
So the
of the
facility.
facility?
Yeah.
Let the committees run
The
with that.
future renovation of Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen. The board directs relevant town committees to research and evaluate the options for highest and best use of the facility.
Great.
period.
Nice.
Very nice, Diane.
Of the property,
Very good.
absolutely.
Excellent.
Building, the
Property.
edifice.
I think property's
property?
more global,
Okay.
because the facility is,
Yeah.
right,
I
because
can
the
see it.
facility might not
Yeah.
exist.
All
I
right.
see a car wash going in here.
Yeah. Just- Can we have a drive-through Starbucks closer to town? The future,
car wash
here we
coming.
go. The future renovation of Town Hall is a concern of the Board of Selectmen. The board directs relevant town committees to research and evaluate the options for highest and best use of the property.
Okay.
Amen.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 5-0. Very good.
That almost deserves a round of applause for
Yeah.
yourselves.
I do have one other little technical
Yeah.
question, because we do this twice in this. We refer to spring 2012 or 13 town meeting. So it's the annual town meeting for fiscal year 2013, but it
Right.
was held in
12.
spring 2012. What's the proper way of reference?
Proper way of referencing this, as voted on May 12th, 2012. In the top line.
May 12, 2012. Okay, so I'll make those
So make that
small
global
adjustments in two places.
Great.
Good catch, Diane.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to the next item.
Yeah.
Recap of the Board of Selectmen goals and objectives session. Determine schedule for discussion of and action of specific items. So this was the nutting
Yeah.
seminar that we had at the Lightkeepers, and I think it was a great session. It just is offering us an opportunity to kind of reset a lot of stuff in town government, and who else would like to speak on this?
Go ahead, Martha.
No, I think it gave us a lot of food for thought, and was good because it gave us, sitting there, somebody else's introspective of the Board of Selectmen, and I thought that was good. And he had a lot of humor. And when
Yeah.
you give something with humor, it relaxes everybody, and we all chit-chatted. And I thought it was very good. I took copious notes, and it was very, very good. I enjoyed it very much.
I think it helped, when we were here in June and put together some goals and objectives, that, I think we've all kind of worked with in the back of our minds, but then, the day-to-day stuff starts going on, and I think it was nice to sit around a table and have an outside party kind of affirm that we were on the right path, and we need to get back on that path, in terms of accomplishing, what we need to do in the best interest of the town. So I was, I thought it was great.
And, Jeff had a number of points which I appreciated, some of them great what I thought were useful observations, and some which were very practical recommendations. The observations, I frankly think he did an incredible job of his relating in plain English what the board is expected to do and how it's expected to conduct those affairs that, that we, Town Manager Act gives us the ability to see things from a greater altitude and in more general and directional principles, and we have the resources around us to, to set that in motion. And then the more specific things, among them that I found most useful was the observation that we spend an awful lot of time meeting, which leaves relatively little time to get those executional pieces done. And it sure would be useful to be able to start to segregate some time to focus on specific and large items of concern. So whether that's determining what an HR function is and what we expect them to accomplish, or some other item of importance, those things merit focused and devoted discussion that cannot come in, at the tail end of a long night. So those were the elements that I found Jeff brought to the meeting, which were very meaningful.
Right, I agree. I think he had the excellent observation that a lot of boards, us included, tend to get pulled into the day-to-day operational stuff, and we lose sight of the big picture in allocating that time out to work on the longer-range goals. And so I think we definitely have to book out, try to keep meetings shorter, but book out times where we're not doing the general business, but doing some more long-range objectives. And
We did that tonight, just
Yeah.
with this
Yeah.
budget
Yeah.
discussion.
And I did draft something for the board's consideration. It actually could come up under the Collins Center or here, but it's related to both. So it was the idea that we were going to recommit to the Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse, and also communicate that to the Collins Center, so that they could communicate that to anybody that did get down to the finals.
That's very good. I
Yeah.
think that's excellent.
Do you want me to read this letter real quick? And I was thinking of, okay, so it says, it's to Dan Evans, ask him to forward it to the Collins Center. It says, on Thursday evening, September 26th, the Board of Selectmen attended a Selectmen's Gold and Objective Seminar at the Lightkeepers run by Jeff Nutting. One of the topics discussed was what could the board do to restore civility back into the board and other areas of town government. The Board of Selectmen will be discussing this further this evening, but Jeff Nutting recommended that the Board of Selectmen recommit itself to the Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse. So I wrote this before tonight, and I can rearrange it, but general consensus was made to review the following three documents as part of resetting the atmosphere in town government. One, the Town of Cohasset Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse, and I have Cohasset in parentheses. Two, role of the Board of Selectmen, I have Nutting in parentheses because he was the source of that. And three, Code of Conduct for the Town of Sudbury committees whose members are appointed by the Sudbury Board of Selectmen or the Sudbury Town Manager, and that's Sudbury in parentheses. So those were the three things that he brought forward that we can discuss a little bit more tonight. And then I said, as part of this review, the Board of Selectmen, at Jeff Nutting's suggestion, agreed that these documents should be forwarded to the Collins Center to reassure each potential candidate that the Board of Selectmen are serious in recommitting to the Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse and setting the example themselves going forward. On behalf of the townspeople, it was evident Thursday evening that the Cohasset Board of Selectmen needed to move forward to recommit to the Code of Core Values for Civil Discourse by vote and example. I personally remain hopeful the board will lead by example and focus on the town's business with new vigor. So I can adjust that some, but I don't know if we want to take a vote on recommitting the core values tonight. And
Yeah, my only question is why include the Sudbury thing? Is that something different that we should be
well,
looking at
we
in
can
comparison with
certainly
ours?
just adopt the whole thing and change Sudbury to Cohasset if we want. But I think the idea was that we are, during this next month, we'll be working on adopting one, two, or three of these things, but that I think Nutting's point was we should let everybody know that we're doing that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I'm open to suggestions on how we do that.
No, I think what you've said, you can reorganize language maybe,
Yeah.
but I think that's very good, because we don't wanna, we're
So-
not working on a vacuum here.
Right, so
Everybody should
instead
know
of me
what's going
sending it out, I thought tonight would be an opportunity to decide if we wanted to have any action, and I could then change it around.
What I took away from his suggestion was that it really was imperative for the board to recommit to a code of civility. I don't know that at this point it matters whether it's the Cohasset one or the Sudbury one or some combination thereof or another one. But that the board commits to that, and that we will be working either to reapprove the existing one or to refine it. And that our goal I can't remember exactly what you said there, Fred, but
Yeah.
something about the, to assure the candidates.
Yeah.
What we're working under,
Yeah,
I think that's important.
So I think the distinction was, there were three, we have the code of core values for civil discourse. Nutting provided us with a role for the roles for the Board of Selectmen, and then the Sudbury was a code of conduct for committees.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I have no issue sending the code of core values and for civil discourse on to the Collins Center.
Yeah.
Bless you. And I would think that we'd want to discuss the, for lack of a better phrase, the Sudbury policy for our own adoption, for our own committees.
Right.
And I think that's where you're going with it.
Yeah.
I just read through it, and I gotta tell you, from my experience, we don't have any such thing.
Right.
And
No,
it would be useful. And there's a quick read through, it doesn't show anything that looks
How
like
about
it's
if I
taking time
phrase
bomb,
it,
so.
that we'll be reviewing those things, the last two, but it would certainly be a lot stronger tonight if I could put in this letter that the board recommitted to the Cohasset Code of
Oh,
Core
yeah, no,
Values.
no, there's no resistance there.
I'm
So-
happy to also move that Jeff Nutting's role of the Board of Selectmen. 'Cause
Okay,
Yes.
Just the Sudbury thing,
I need some more work,
it
yeah.
just needs a little
Yeah.
work because it has mission, the mission statement of the committee. Well, a lot of
Yeah.
committees don't have mission statements, so
Right.
we can
Yeah, we
work
have-
that up, but I
Oh, so I'll say that, we're reviewing that, but
Yep.
the other two,
and you can include it too, because
yes, yeah, we'll include it and say
these are
we're
the-
reviewing it, yeah.
the initiatives, these are the statements that we want to affirm.
Who would like to move the code of core, recommitting the code of core values for
So
civil
moved.
discourse? Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. Who would like to move the role of the Board of Selectmen?
I'll
So-
move it.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Do you
Yeah.
want to just do the edit for administrator to town manager?
Thank you. As amended.
It's amended. I'll amend it.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'll just mention the other ones under review.
Yeah.
Okay? Yeah.
While I was out of the room, I don't know if this is discussed, so please
Yeah.
tell me. One of the things that I took away was Mr. Nutting's suggestion that the board commit to a unanimous support of whatever candidate, whichever candidate, whatever the right adverb pronoun is, that is selected for permanent town manager. And that he encouraged us to have our discussion and our debate and for everybody to make their votes, but then when a majority vote, and we may be very surprised, we might have a 5-0 majority vote anyway, but that the board would immediately vote a 5-0 vote to support the majority vote. And I'm wondering if how the board would feel about including some statement like that within the letter to the Collins Center, because I think that would be something the candidates, would be important to candidates to know, that the board will come together behind the candidate.
Well, I just point out that was also discussed in a broader context of the board being open to discussing all issues and then taking a vote, but maybe creating a policy where we then get behind the vote of the board and affirm it with an additional vote of unanimous vote to move something forward. So, it's not without its problems, but why don't we discuss where we wanna go with that?
Again, I just took Mr. Nutting's advice very much to heart and felt that it was something he was stressing that would be important for the board to do, to to assure candidates coming to Cohasset that they will enjoy the full support of the full board. And I do hope that when the selection comes, we do have a 5-0 vote, but on the off chance that we don't, I think that would be a very positive thing going forward. Whoever is whichever candidate is successful. And none of us even know who the candidates are at this point,
Right.
so.
Well, I'll ask, I guess, everybody individually to just examine their conscience now and answer the question, if, for instance, there was a 4-1 vote or a 3-2 vote, are they willing to then follow up with a unanimous vote just to move forward when the time comes? Any thoughts or feelings on it?
You know, I mean, absolutely. Whoever gets hired, and it's by a majority of the board, that's the decision. I mean, we've gone back on too many decisions in the past, because we change our minds on things. I would be, happy to make that vote, because this board has ultimately one vote, and whatever that is, that's the person, and we have to be supportive of whoever it is. And I think in order for me to feel really comfortable about doing this now, I would want it to be just whoever the hire is, that we would then make that decision, because, I worry about the pool, frankly, I really do.
I understand what I understand the nature and the intent of Jeff's comments, and I think if I were coming in here as a newly appointed or hired employee, and I were to get a split vote, I'd begin to wonder where I was working.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I agree with it. The one reason I resist at the moment committing to it is that, as Diane just mentioned, I was gonna bring this up later on under the Collins Center update, is that I'm concerned, as I wrote last week, I'm concerned that we may end up with a mediocre group. And my question to the board is then, what's Plan B? I mean, if it's a split 3-2, but it's because, but it's the best that we're seeing.
Right.
Right? What's our Plan B if that's the case? If you know you're getting behind someone that just, no matter what you do, let's say that, that it goes the opposite way that you think, and that there are 3 people here that don't include Martha and you, Diane, that want to hire someone, but you two say, absolutely not, I don't agree with it, because I don't think that person's, not, they just don't have the capacities that I'm looking for. At that point, if the shoe were on the, if the situation were reversed,
Yeah.
would you then feel comfortable committing to the town that you're gonna stand behind this person when you know that that person is not up to the task? Or I should say, your best judgment is that person is not up to the task. And that's,
Well, in the last 2 searches, we did discuss the option and the pricing structure of, well, what happens if we just don't get a viable pool to go through all the motions with? And they each said, by all means, we'll re-advertise, we'll take another bite at the apple. So that's a decision the board would have to make when we see what comes in.
right.
But if we do decide that, okay, there's sufficient depth in this pool here to go forward, I think what we're talking about now is, we've made a decision that amongst that pool, we think we have a permanent town manager, so their governing position is gonna be stronger if we end up with an unanimous vote
Right.
there.
No, I agree with that premise. I'm, as I said, my bigger concern, and it may not actually be directed to this body, but rather to the Collins Center. Jeff Nutting was very clear that the task is cut out for the Collins Center to find that person, given both the track record the town has had with some of its appointees over the past several years, and the headlines we've tended to make, and so forth. With all of that into the mix, will the Collins Center make the point to us that they're not satisfied with what they're finding? And that is another concern of mine. Back around though, Karen, your original question was,
Well,
would I stand behind it? Yes, if there is a.
The other thing I'd like to say, Steve, is that your premise, what I hear you saying, and your premise is that there may be 3 individuals, any combination of us, who would be willing to vote for a candidate that would not be able to do the job, and I don't believe any one of us would do that.
No, in whose opinion? Let's put it that way. I mean, I remember.
We
But
agree
I-
to disagree. Steve's
Yeah.
proposing that, hey, there's some disagreement on the board, but the disagreement isn't on which candidate, it's that there's no candidate in
Right.
somebody's mind.
Right.
So I would
Right.
say on that concept, then by all means, I wouldn't expect you to vote unanimously if you, as long as you would voice that opinion at that stage where we're saying, are we gonna go with this pool or not?
Right.
Then I think we have to really ask, are we making the right decision to go forward if we've got 1 or 2 members saying that we don't like the pool?
Nutting's.
But I think what I'm,
Okay.
all I'm saying, I mean, I think we're talking about 2 different sets
Yeah.
of circumstances. That if there is a majority vote for a candidate, and the only difference is that 2 people or 1 person thinks that candidate XYZ is the better candidate, and the other and the majority thinks that candidate B, but the board as a whole agrees that both candidates are viable candidates.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. no.
I keep
Yes.
going back to that there isn't a person sitting here at this desk that would vote for somebody who is unable to perform.
All I'm saying in making that determination, Karen, is that that my view on what makes a capable candidate and someone else's view on what makes a capable and qualified
But-
candidate may differ enough fundamentally. With the premise that you just put forward, where the pool includes candidates that clearly have demonstrated capabilities and qualifications, that that the minority, having chosen someone different, could I be part of the minority that then votes in the affirmative for the appointment? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
I think that's an important message to send to the candidates, and it might, I believe it is, and Mr. Nutting, with his experience, believed that it is, and I would hope that the board, with whatever caveats you want to place on it, that the board would be able to say, given qualified candidates, the board will support whichever candidate is hired.
I mean,
I may
would-
be on the minority side.
I would hope
I
that
probably
the
will
board
be.
would do so in any case. I mean, if this body believes it's necessary to communicate that, then then do so. But yeah, it is with that caveat that it's,
That's
in
fine.
good conscience, the candidates are qualified. Okay, or qualified and represent what we believe to be a good fit for the town. So, but yes, I understand what Jeff's point, I understand Jeff's point and why he believes that is a powerful message. And I can't imagine how difficult a job it must be for a town manager recognizing that, that every 3 years, you really have to reprove yourself.
To a changing set of.
Well,
To an
it could be
ever-changing set
every
of-
year to a
Yeah,
new
there's a new
board that
board,
presents
yeah.
itself, yeah,
Changes the
yeah.
dynamic.
So,
One of the things, I mean, it's a very difficult job, one of the things that makes being a town manager hardest in my mind is that each year you could have different people sitting here, and that whether you get along with them or they get along with you or not, it is your job to get along with them and to
work towards, help them work towards the best interests of the town. It's a
Am-
very difficult position.
Amen. And so from that perspective, as I said, you know, if we believe it becomes a powerful message to the candidate pool, then, you know, insert it.
Okay, so is everybody comfortable, something along the words that provided the board is in agreement on a viable pool that at the end, irregardless of the vote, the candidate can then expect a unanimous vote following that?
Mm-hmm,
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
like that
Yes.
viable pool.
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else we want to, I think we're obviously going to be coming back to the nutting seminar and over the course of time and working on our goals and objectives. Mike?
One of the things that Jeff did recommend is the possibility of you guys creating subcommittees. So you may, just a suggestion, want to create a subcommittee to go over this Sudbury piece and have one of the members come back, as well as other documents with some recommendations, just to go through the language, so we're not
Good
doing that here in a
suggestion.
public meeting.
Any volunteers on a subcommittee for that?
I'd love to do it, and I'm going to, I don't know if anybody's going to the Selectmen's Conference this weekend.
I'm going.
I am,
So
yeah.
we can all,
I'm not, it's my anniversary,
Oh,
so I'm going away.
I can't carpool those. I'm going to a funeral right after that in JP,
no
so.
problem.
Mm.
But I love wordsmithing, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
Oh, good, okay.
I'll volunteer on that one, but I also,
You're-
go ahead.
Diane volunteered.
Oh,
It's
No,
a
no,
subcommittee
subcommittee.
too.
Two people.
Yeah.
Oh, two. Oh,
Subcommittee,
yeah,
yeah.
that's good. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do the typing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Did the typing.
Okay, and then, whenever that's ready, let me know. We'll put it on the agenda.
Mm.
Okay? Anything else on nutting before we move on?
We talked about the personnel management piece, that's, and I thought that you had identified that there was a specific date that you wanted to bring that up, the HR
Yeah.
area. And specifically, what I think we
Month.
ought to be addressing is, what is it that we're expecting, what is it that we're expecting out of this function? And that's an,
Should we wait for the full report?
no, yes, but my point is, I want to make sure it stays on the radar, that it gets a date.
I made a note for
Okay.
4
Yes,
weeks
right
from
there.
tonight, on the 29th of October.
Uh,
Well, that would give, he was gonna be done in 3 weeks, so that'll give him 4 weeks to do a full review. And then we can discuss what the options are for this year and the budget implications of that in the FY15.
Yes.
So I've tentatively got it on for October 29th, 4 weeks from tonight.
And then likewise, the same with regard to legal services. There are two primary questions that I had
Yeah.
on that. You collectively may have many others.
Yeah.
But my two were, what are the marching orders to town council? What is the directive from the board to town council? And by that, I simply mean that, from my viewpoint, town council should be our risk manager. They should be advising us as to when we are about to get into trouble. Jeff Nutting had made some points as to how he uses his, that his council often will review ZBA and Concom decisions before they're issued, to make certain that they're not creating issues.
Why don't I do this?
That happens
think
here
that
too,
happens
But,
here.
and they
Why
also
don't I do
attend the
this?
meetings.
Let's,
I'm talking about
let me talk to availability of town council to come in and us go into executive and just review all the cases, and then we could come out of executive and go into this.
Okay,
That
no,
sounds a great
that
idea.
makes great sense. And the reason I'm bringing it up is to give directive
It's the management of legal services. How do we control
well,
who's accessing and what's the protocol?
that's the other piece.
Yeah.
But really, what I'm talking about with regard to management is not access, but laying out expectations. I think it makes sense to define what we expect, from
Well,
our
can everybody do
advisor.
this and work on their own
Yeah.
agenda of what needs to be discussed at that? And when we have that meeting, bring that with you so we
Okay.
hit all those points, okay? So,
In preparation for that, could we either get a copy of the existing contract or,
yep.
so that we
Okay.
know what they're providing to us?
It's not what they're providing, Karen, but what we want them to provide.
Well, we might find that they're providing it, we just don't know it.
I don't know.
It's,
I
it has to
think
be
it's
useful
good.
to look at the contract.
I would also recommend, Michael, if you're pulling this together, or Tracy, because the council's very, the contract is very dry, we should probably also look at it vis-à-vis the bylaws, because the bylaws, which we're gonna have to look at vis-à-vis the Town Manager Act, but there's all kinds of different references to town council and what functionality they have, and then the contract, which is,
Can somebody highlight the bylaws and make a quick list of what
Perhaps the
sections are
governance committee has
referring
already
to,
done that.
they
to,
have, to some
town
degree.
council?
We can, and Mr. Chairman, to pick up on your comments, I don't think it's appropriate tonight to get into this in too depth without town council being here that can provide some color to this. But the appropriate time to do this would be the 29th as well, because the HR piece ties into this in some level with risk management and what's being done here.
Yeah.
That it may be worth making that meeting just focused on legal and also on HR and nothing else, assuming he's available on the 29th.
Yeah, well, the HR piece is important, but I think that this is like a whole nother, at least an hour or more in executive
Yeah.
to just go through all the different cases and.
That's what I'm saying, just those two things and nothing else on the
Yeah.
agenda.
Let me see what fits in the schedule, and I'll talk to them, okay?
Well, we'd have the executive,
Yeah,
then we'd have the legal services, and we'd have HR.
Right.
And all of those are going to be very, are going
Well-
to need a lot of time and attention, so
This isn't in there,
I'd
so-
almost separate out the HR, because that, to me, seems to be our biggest issue right now while we're working at the,
It's immediate stuff.
it's immediate. And, I think our goal of trying to have shorter meetings and
Yeah, I-
focus more on individual.
my sense is the bandwidth needed for both those would be separate
Yes, it's
nights.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, here we are at 10 again. Let's, so I will talk to them about scheduling and see what works for them. We ready to move on to Collins Center update?
Yep.
Okay, so here's the revised professional services agreement. It's $1,500 less because of the no selection option, and the only change is in section 4 again, as revised, it's September 24th,
Okay.
2013.
And town council has signed off on this also,
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
Well,
He
I
didn't
read it.
initial, I wish town council would initial things.
I think as a rule, lawyers don't,
Well,
We've had those discussions.
approve other bodies.
well, okay, then he'll do it afterwards.
Right.
Well, he definitely reviewed this, it was
Yeah,
sent
he
to
did
him, yeah,
review.
yeah.
Okay.
Definitely, I know that, I saw the.
And the other thing is, this was the date of the advisory board transfer, October 1st, subject to us determining which town manager act to go forward under. It looks like the new town manager act is moving through the legislature, and the last legal advice I had from town council was we could, in a sense, go forward with both. We have to obey the law, and the current law is the current town manager act. But by allowing some of the provisions in the new one to take effect, I mean, to respect that, even though it hasn't been signed, we can go forward simultaneously under both. If, for instance, the new act had some modification that came out of the legislature, we'd have to revisit certain aspects of the search. But I think right now we're in a position where we can comfortably move forward under both without violating the law, because, and then, I'm assuming that the new act is gonna pass. If it doesn't, then the decision's made for us, we're under the first act, but it seems, that it's kind of a moot point, that we can go forward under both without a conflict.
Just on a practical level, it's late, yeah. The, whatever that document was that the Collins Center created,
Profile?
The
Services?
profile, thank
Yeah.
you very much, the town profile, which is, it does reference both acts.
Yeah,
So that somebody that wants to understand what they're coming into, presumably, given the fact that it will likely pass, that they know what material changes are happening. But I think we have, I think saying we're moving along simultaneously with both or whatever is not actually accurate, because I think we have to just say it's the current Town Manager Act.
yeah, yeah.
You know, we're in the process of adopting or whatever the second, the amended version, but right now, it's the current Town Manager Act. You know, I think the only material, there's a lot of what I think are more material things, you know, like the ability to, the budget process, the budget guidelines, and certainly those are more frameworks of how we operate as opposed to restrictions. So, you know, the big restriction is that a town employee couldn't apply for this job, for example, or, you know, couldn't be hired under the current Town Manager Act. My understanding is if a town employee or a committee person in town did apply for the job and was one of the finalists and was brought here and we decided to offer the job to that person, that we could keep them on as like in an acting capacity.
And wait
or
for
give
the
them-
final
Right,
passage, yeah,
subject to
yeah,
final passage of the amended Town Manager Act.
Yeah.
So that's just a little technicality.
That's kind of what I meant, like, you can go forward under the current law, but you can
Queue up.
wait for the other one to go into, you can make it work. Peter?
Mr. Chairman, Peter Pescatori, Advisory. The Advisory Committee had asked the board to take this action to determine at this point what the qualification criteria was going to be. And I think until the new Town Manager Act is signed off by the governor, you only have one.
That's right.
Yeah,
But as a practical matter, I think Colin should look at everybody, but anyone who would be eliminated under the current law should be clearly identified. So that in the event that it doesn't get signed into law, that person would be eliminated from the consideration and be clearly identified. It's the clearly identified part that I think is important.
And my understanding is,
Because it was all about qualification.
yeah,
That's,
yeah.
the whole thing was about qualification.
I
So
think
with that caveat, I would release the board, I guess.
Thank you. You gonna give us money?
I gave it to you
Yeah,
already.
we gave it
As
to
a-
us.
as a practical matter, the money was already approved.
Okay.
Yeah.
We approved the money, we're
Well,
just
I-
waiting for the qualification.
Yeah.
I'm just reading what's in the agenda.
Give us the money. I don't give,
development.
Follow the money.
Follow the money.
so, I mean, if you could just, direct the Collins Group in that manner, I think that would satisfy the board members on my committee that were
Okay.
concerned.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't want to have them, their voice not be heard in this.
You're a good chair.
more comments?
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, is anybody comfortable forming a motion to that effect?
Good luck.
Forming? That's what it's gonna be.
I move that the board authorize the chair through our liaison, the town moderator, to notify the Collins Center that candidates that qualify under the proposed Town Manager Act pending legislature be clearly defined, be considered, but be clearly defined in the event that the act should fail. On the Hill?
What about
that
the
close?
other?
They
What
actually
about-
not be
What about the?
enacted into law.
Yeah, but you're not mentioning the other act at all.
Well, but
Well,
by
we-
definition, we default
It
to it.
exists.
It
Yeah, we
exists.
go- we'll go forward
Exists,
under the
okay,
present
okay.
act.
All right, I was just looking.
Yeah.
All right, so I could amend it to say, to advise the Collins Center that to qualify candidates under the existing Town Manager Act, but to accept,
Or tentatively include,
Tentatively include.
subject to the passage
Passage
of
of
the,
Yeah, yeah, okay.
right, but that they be clearly defined.
this is a mess.
Got this,
huh?
Tracy? Got this, Stacy?
You can also listen to the tape.
Yeah,
You say, just say to the Collins Group, please bring us all
Qualified candidates.
yeah,
And- and-
But
yeah.
And I-
clearly identify
Anybody that would,
anybody who would not qualify under the current act.
okay. That's
So
excellent.
moved.
Thank you, Peter.
Do you want to put that in the form of a motion?
He just did.
Just what Peter said.
Just what Peter said.
We're getting punchy.
We are
Yeah.
getting punchy. Would anybody like
Okay.
to second that?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
I just,
Yeah.
Tracy, once you're done, could you reread it? Okay.
Give it your best shot.
Well, Martha said, listen to the tape, so I just
There you go. Yeah. Listen to the tape.
Okay, how about the plain English version? Candidates that fit under both acts will be considered, it needs to be clearly identified those candidates that would be excluded under the existing Town Manager Act.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Those finalists, because we don't need to know about them.
Yeah,
We
it's just the
need to know if they
finalists,
make
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
finalist here that.
Tracy's gonna kill you,
That's
okay?
So
Okay.
all I wanna know, we're going with your motion, right?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes,
So that was the
we'll
plain English version, listen to the tape still,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay.
I'll withdraw my motion. I'll second Steve's motion.
Tapes at
Excellent.
3
Any
hours
further
and 8
discussion?
minutes.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Actually, all we voted on was you giving them the message,
Yeah.
Fred, so.
Well,
Just give them the message.
I will, okay.
Communicate clearly whatever you can.
Yeah.
Do we need to vote to authorize you to sign the contract?
I think we already have that.
You've
But
already done
This is
it.
an amendment.
Correct.
Yeah, we've done
We
that.
did that one? Okay.
okay,
What
so-
about we don't need to vote on this, the services thing, right?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
I think we're all set with the Collins
Okay.
Center.
Okay.
Shall we ready for a selectman comment?
Do you wanna make a comment?
Oh, thank you for reminding me. I'd like to request that the board have a moment of silence. Martha just informed me of the passing of a long time Hingham and Cohasset resident, long time in Cohasset, Polly Logan.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah,
Yesterday.
yesterday. Could we have a moment of silence for her? Thank you. I just want to tell a quick anecdote. In the year 2000, Polly was nominated by the Republican State Committee to be an elector, and I was nominated by the Democratic State Committee to be an elector. So depending on who won the state of Massachusetts, Cohasset was having an elector no matter what. And Polly and I were out one night, and we were at somewhere together, and she was driving, and one of the TV channels called, and they wanted to interview me because Gore had won the state. And she graciously came with me to the studio and sat through the whole interview. But I had a great time driving around with her, and she was just a font of old political stories, which I happen to be partial to. So, but
Well,
Martha,
Well, she was the founding member of the Cohasset Community Garden Club, and in 1959, all by herself. And also, I believe she was on the tree committee. That was the only town board she was on. But she always wanted the Republican Party to have a big tent of all kinds of different people, and it was for a long, long time. And unfortunately, she became ill and through the later years. But we at the Garden Club discussed it this morning, and we're going to try and do something in her honor here for the town. We haven't quite decided, but it was a long discussion.
yeah, yeah.
She was quite a colorful character here, so.
And that was quite an estate, the Logan Estate
Oh,
on
it was
Jerusalem Road. It
wonderful.
was magnificent. I don't know if everybody remembers it,
Yeah.
but it's right at the beginning of, on the left, where there's a development now, but
Yeah.
fantastic mansion there that oversaw that property.
And we had
you know,
meetings
A lot
there.
of parties there, too.
Garden, oh yeah, there were wild parties. But anyway.
That's enough.
Martha, right?
That's enough, Martha.
Well, up to the Cohasset standard.
Well, she's gonna be sorely missed. She had a great influence on a lot of people in
Yeah.
town.
She did, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, selectmen comment. Martha?
Let's see. I want to add, with the Historical Commission, not only do they want their budget put back that was cut a couple of years ago, they want more money because they've got other things they want to do.
Bring it to town meeting.
Well, since you're the advisory board and
just
I
issued our
work in the
statement.
budget committee, I just thought I'd bring it up. And,
The reserve fund cannot be used for
I-
that kind of funding, and the only recourse is to go to town meeting and request a increase in the budget
well,
from town meeting.
I'm just the messenger.
She's just delivering the message,
I'm
yeah.
the messenger.
Giving you the answer.
Should have brought it up earlier.
That's all.
Karen?
The only thing I have tonight is the really great news regarding the grant that was obtained by the Housing Authority.
Oh, yeah.
And Fred, that was under, when you were liaison.
Well, there was a 689 grant then, but this is another one.
This
Yeah.
is another one.
Yeah.
They've worked really hard. The Tredis House, which houses many of or a number of the residents there, is an older building, and it really isn't configured to be the best use for the residents. And so the Housing Authority worked very, very hard and applied for a grant. And they just received notification that they got the grant, they were awarded the grant. And the grant will allow them not to have to get a bridge loan, that they will be able to use the grant, and then, once the new housing is complete, sell the Tredis house, and that money will count towards the matching funds for
Yeah.
the grant, so.
And they'll get a piece of land off the Tredis, right, to build on? Yeah, I
Well,
think.
I guess, well,
Or
I'm not
there's
quite
land
sure. There's
available
land
somewhere,
available
yeah.
back there, that they plan to put the new structure on that will better suit the residents, so, really kudos to the Housing Authority for all their hard work and working out a way to
Yeah.
fund their needs.
So just, I'll give a little history, because I was on the Housing Authority
Right.
when the first 689, Chapter 689 grants were given, and we got 2 units at 689, which hold 4 people, plus their support staff, and those are in the back behind the fire station. And then the Tredis House was utilized also, so this will be at least another 4-unit building that then the Tredis property will get sold off, and it won't cost the town anything. And I think they've been great for the neighborhood. The neighborhood, we had, at the time I was on the Housing Authority, we had a lot of public hearings about that, and the neighbors were very supportive, and I was very proud of Cohasset that they stepped forward. And this is similar, and I think it'll be great for the town. Okay.
An older I said, is that a historic house, I think?
It's an old cape, it's
an
been a
old-
while, yeah,
So it'll be back on the market.
yeah. Diane,
I don't have anything.
okay, Steve.
In the interest of expediting things, my only comment I had is thank you all for your acceptance of Jeff Nutting coming in. I didn't know him at all prior to the meeting. I thought it was very effective. I realize this is typically reserved for commentaries of general interest, but I think this is of general interest to the town. And if there's a single product that's come out of it, it was very helpful to see everybody focus some time and attention on the budget message and get it out. So I thank you very much.
Thank you for all your work on it. Town manager update.
I'll be just as brief. I have an emergency item from Merle Brown. And Merle Brown wants to let the Board of Selectmen know that he attended the Cable Advisory and Community Television Committee meeting tonight and thought it was very interesting. and as we know, we have some vacancies on that. He would like the board to appoint him to the committee. He can't wait. So we have a vacancy.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a line of people that are there, and he's requesting to be appointed.
Okay.
Is there, I mean, I realize that the governance committee is looking at things like term limits and so on, but I mean, is there like a cap on how many committees you can serve on? Because Merle has got to have like 20 or 30 notched up by now.
They're over time now.
Right.
They're over.
Yeah, it's
No, I
contiguous or simultaneous ones that, I'm not sure. What is he on right now?
Governance.
He's on governance now.
Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
I'm in favor of taking this up now, but it's off the agenda, can
Yeah.
we?
It's a good question.
You technically can. It's if there's a unanimous decision to do it, that's your call.
Not, the
Well,
item's not
I mean, under
reasonably
the thing,
anticipated?
it's something the chairman didn't know 48 hours in advance. I certainly didn't know that. I mean, I
Didn't know
knew
it
there
5
was-
minutes ago.
So, to answer your question, there are some committees, like I think advisory has a restriction on membership on other ones. And so there's certain bylaws that, on different committees that,
Advisory's the only one that has.
is it? Yeah, yeah.
Advisory's the only
yeah.
one.
And Merle Brown's email is at 8:24 p.m., which was after the meeting started.
You mean you just got that?
Yes, that's what I said.
Well,
He
what's the
attended
pleasure of the
tonight.
board? Do you want to just amend the agenda to deal with this, or you want to take it under advisement, or?
I'm happy to
Um,
amend the
w- with-
agenda.
With the understanding we're still looking for somebody with capabilities for the treasurer position, this would be in addition to that.
There's still another position available, plus in 6 months, there's going to be a
So we're
treasurer's
still looking for
position.
more people.
Correct.
Yes.
And we
And
have
also, we're still looking for more people for the,
Historic.
And we have a
Historic Commission.
volunteer.
And we have an active
We have an
volunteer.
active volunteer.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend the agenda to include the appointment of cable TV slot?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the agenda is amended. Do we have, Mike,
I'll
Make your
move to-
proposal.
I'll move-
Well, it's a Board of
it's a
Selectmen's
board
appointment.
approval. So I'll move to appoint Merle Brown to the Cable Advisory Committee.
second.
any discussion?
Is that the actual title of the committee?
It's Cable Advisory and Community Television Committee.
Got it.
Amended as such.
CACTV?
CACTV.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Congratulations, Merle.
If you're still watching at home.
Still watching.
So I think that's a good example of the efficiency of town government. From 8:24 to 10:22, an hour and 58 minutes, we have someone appointed to a committee. I don't think that's ever happened in town before.
Do we have any minutes?
Yes.
I mean, we have executive, but that,
Yep.
we're gonna have to go in executive.
Yeah, but the other minutes are not on the agenda. You can't,
You can't act on that.
I didn't bring them.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night, guys.
Okay, make a note on that.
I don't understand the black in
I think it was highlighted.
there.
So everybody's been reviewing those, and we'll take them up at the right time.
And I
but-
have reviewed for 2 hours the executive session ones too, so maybe we can.
We'll do
put
it
up-
soon.
Yeah, we can vote out the ones that says we can, but a lot of them have to have some technical. I've got a whole list of stuff, it's just minutia.
Public comment. Any public comment? Seeing there's none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
You'll get it.
Any second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
There was something in here asking for permission to use the